Victoria Hale had never needed anyone, until the night she couldn't stand up straight. In a ballroom full of Chicago's elite, the city's most feared CEO was drowning in champagne and applause, teetering on the edge of disaster while everyone pretended not to notice. Everyone except Ethan Cole, a man who had every reason to walk away but chose to stay. This is the story of what happens when power meets compassion, when control meets surrender, and when two broken people find strength in the most unlikely place. Hit that like button and comment your city below so I can see how far this story travels. Now, let's begin. The Grandeur Hotel's Imperial Ballroom had never looked more magnificent. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen constellations above a sea of Chicago's wealthiest and most influential, each one worth more than most people earned in a lifetime. The annual Mercy Children's Hospital Gala was the event of the season, the kind of night where fortunes were discussed over cocktails, where political careers were made in quiet corners, and where reputation was the only currency that truly mattered. Victoria Hale stood at the center of it all, a vision in crimson. Her gown was a masterpiece of design, deep red silk that caught the light with every movement, tailored so precisely it might have been painted onto her frame. Diamonds glittered at her throat and wrists, cold and flawless, much like the woman wearing them. At 38, Victoria commanded Hale Industries with an iron fist wrapped in designer leather, transforming her father's struggling manufacturing company into a tech empire worth billions. Forbes called her ruthless. The Wall Street Journal called her brilliant. Her employees called her terrifying. Tonight, she was all of those things and more. Victoria, darling. Margaret Chen, wife of a state senator, air-kissed both of Victoria's cheeks with practiced precision. That gown is absolutely stunning, Valentino? Custom, Victoria replied, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. I don't wear anything off the rack, Margaret. You should know that by now. Margaret's laugh was just a fraction too loud, just a touch too eager. Of course. Of course. I was just telling Richard that your donation this year must be extraordinary. The renovations to the pediatric wing are exactly what this city needs. Victoria lifted her champagne flute, the golden liquid catching the light. Mercy Hospital has been good to this city. I simply ensure my contributions reflect that. She took a long sip, feeling the bubbles dance down her throat. It was her fourth glass. Or was it her fifth? The evening had started to blur at the edges, softening the harsh lines of networking and performance into something more manageable. The truth was, Victoria hated these events, hated the false intimacy, the calculated flattery, the way everyone wanted something from her while pretending they were just being friendly. But they were necessary. Power required maintenance. Influence demanded investment. So she smiled and drank and played the game better than anyone else in the room. Excuse me, Margaret. I see someone I need to speak with. Victoria glided away before the woman could respond, her heels clicking against marble floors with the steady rhythm of a metronome. She had no one to speak with. She just needed another drink. The bar was crowded with executives and socialites, all jostling for position while trying to appear casual about it. Victoria didn't jostle. She simply appeared at the front of the line, and people moved aside. Champagne, she told the bartender, not bothering with please or thank you. He was being paid to serve, wasn't he? As he poured, Victoria surveyed her kingdom. The ballroom was a chessboard, and she knew every piece, every player, every potential move. There was David Morrison from Morrison Tech, desperately trying to impress venture capitalists who would never take him seriously. There was Elena Rodriguez, the mayor's chief of staff, working the room with professional efficiency. And there, Victoria's eyes narrowed. There was Thomas fucking Whitmore, her primary competitor, holding court near the stage like he owned the place. The bartender handed her the champagne. Victoria downed half of it immediately. Easy there, Tiger. The voice belonged to James Hartley, her CFO, and the closest thing she had to a friend. He materialized beside her, his tuxedo impeccable, his expression amused. We're only 2 hours into a 6-hour event. I can handle my alcohol, James. I'm not questioning your capacity. I'm questioning your strategy. He ordered a scotch, neat. Whitmore's been watching you all night, looking for weaknesses. Maybe don't give him ammunition? Victoria turned to face him fully, her eyes cold. Thomas Whitmore is a mediocre man with inherited money and delusions of competence. I'm not concerned about what he thinks he sees. Victoria, I said, I'm fine. She finished the champagne and set the glass down with more force than necessary. I'm going to circulate. Make sure the right people see me talking to the right people. That's why we're here, isn't it? James watched her go, his expression troubled, but he didn't follow. No one ever really followed Victoria Hale. They orbited at a safe distance, close enough to bask in her light, but far enough to avoid getting burned. The next hour passed in a haze of handshakes and hollow conversations. Victoria moved through the crowd like a shark through water, graceful, predatory, utterly in control. She praised donors, charmed board members, and subtly undermined her competitors with the precision of a surgeon. And she drank. Another glass of champagne, then another. The edges of the room had gone soft and fuzzy, but Victoria told herself it was fine. She was fine. She was always fine. Mrs. Hale? A waiter appeared at her elbow with a tray of canapés. Would you care for something to eat? Victoria waved him away without looking. Food would dilute the alcohol, and she needed the numbness more than she needed sustenance. Needed it to get through another evening of being Victoria Hale, CEO, philanthropist, success story. Needed it to forget that she'd spent the last 15 years building an empire and somehow ended up more alone than when she started. There she is, a booming voice cut through her thoughts. Gerald Price, chairman of the hospital's board, approached with his arms spread wide like he was greeting a long-lost daughter. Our evening star, Victoria, I can't thank you enough for your generosity. Your donation alone funded nearly 40% of the pediatric wing renovations. Victoria summoned her brightest smile. The children of Chicago deserve the best care available. I'm simply ensuring they receive it. Magnificent, just magnificent. Gerald was sweating despite the ballroom's perfect climate control. You know, we were hoping you might say a few words this evening. Just a brief speech about the importance of giving back, inspiring others to follow your example. No. The word came out harder than Victoria intended. She softened it with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I prefer to let my contributions speak for themselves, Gerald. I'm sure you understand. His face fell, but he recovered quickly. Of course. Whatever makes you comfortable. He patted her arm with damp fingers. You're a treasure to this community, Victoria. A true treasure. As he walked away, Victoria grabbed another champagne flute from a passing waiter. The room had started to tilt slightly, the chandeliers swaying like ships at sea. She blinked hard, willing her vision to clear. She was fine. She was always fine. Victoria Hale. The voice was silk and poison. Victoria turned to find Cynthia Blackwood, editor of Chicago's most vicious society column, standing too close with a smile too wide. Cynthia. Victoria kept her voice level. What a surprise! I didn't realize gossip columnists were invited to charity events. Oh, I cover all the important gatherings. Cynthia's eyes were sharp, cataloging every detail of Victoria's appearance. And you always make such interesting copy. That gown is absolutely daring. Very bold choice. It's just a dress, Cynthia. Of course. The columnist's smile widened, though I couldn't help but notice you've been rather enthusiastic with the champagne service this evening. Everything all right? There it was, the knife, slipped between the ribs with practiced ease. Victoria felt a flash of white-hot rage, but she kept it locked behind her perfectly maintained expression. I'm celebrating the success of tonight's fundraising, like everyone else here. Victoria's voice could have frozen fire. Unless you're suggesting there's something wrong with supporting children's health care? Not at all, not at all. Cynthia held up her hands in mock surrender. Simply observing. It's what I do, after all. She leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. You know, people talk. They say you're always working, never seen with anyone, always alone. Some might wonder if all that success comes with a price. Loneliness, perhaps? Stress? Victoria wanted to throw her champagne in the woman's smug face, wanted to tell her exactly where she could shove her observations and implications. But that would be weakness, and Victoria Hale didn't show weakness. People who matter don't gossip, Cynthia, and people who gossip don't matter. Victoria turned away, dismissing the columnist like a servant. Enjoy your evening. She walked away with her head high and her spine straight, but her hands were shaking. The champagne had stopped being fun somewhere around glass number 6 or 7. Now it just made everything feel distant and wrong, like she was watching her life through someone else's eyes. Victoria made it to a quiet corner near the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago skyline. The city glittered below, a million lights in the darkness, each one representing a life she'd never know, a story she'd never hear. Up here, in her glass tower of success and achievement, she could see everything and feel nothing. Her phone buzzed. A text from her assistant. Board meeting moved to 8 a.m. tomorrow. Whitmore leaked the merger details to press. Need damage control strategy before market opens. Of course Thomas had leaked it. Of course there was a crisis waiting for her tomorrow morning. Of course her real life was calling even now, even here, even when she was already drowning. Victoria closed her eyes and drank more champagne. When she opened them again, the room had definitely started spinning. She gripped the window frame for support, her knuckles white against the dark wood. This was fine. She just needed a moment. Just needed to breathe and center herself and remember who she was. Victoria Hale, CEO, billionaire, woman who needed nothing and no one. Mrs. Hale. Victoria turned too quickly and stumbled, her heel catching on the hem of her gown. Strong hands caught her elbows, steadying her before she could fall. Whoa, easy there. The voice was unfamiliar, warm and deep and devoid of the calculated charm that usually surrounded her. Victoria blinked up at her rescuer and found herself looking at a man she didn't recognize. He was tall, maybe 6'1", with broad shoulders filling out a tuxedo that was clearly rented rather than tailored. His face was handsome in an understated way, strong jaw, kind eyes, dark hair just starting to silver at the temples. But what struck Victoria most was his expression. He wasn't looking at her with the usual mixture of awe and calculation. He was looking at her with something that felt dangerously like concern. I'm fine, Victoria said automatically, pulling back from his grip. The room swayed. She wasn't fine. You sure about that? The man didn't let go immediately, making sure she was steady before releasing her. You looked like you were about to do a faceplant into that window. I said I'm fine. Victoria tried to summon her usual ice, but her words came out slurred around the edges. I don't need help from... She trailed off, realizing she had no idea who this man was. In a room full of Chicago's elite, where Victoria knew every face that mattered, this stranger was an anomaly. Ethan Cole, he supplied, seeing her confusion. I work in your engineering department. Data analysis. An employee. Of course. Someone so far below her usual orbit that she'd never bothered to learn his name. The thought made something twist in Victoria's chest. Guilt, maybe, or shame, or just the champagne turning sour in her stomach. Right. Ethan. Engineering. Victoria straightened her spine, trying to reclaim her dignity. What are you doing at this event? This is typically executive-level attendance. Something flickered across Ethan's face. Not quite amusement, not quite judgment. My late wife's sister is on the hospital board. She convinced me to come, said it would be good for me to get out. He paused. She was probably right, though I'm not really the gala type. Late wife. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Victoria was too drunk to fully process. All she registered was the absence of a ring on his finger and the quiet grief that seemed to live in the corners of his eyes. I'm sorry for your loss, she said, because it was the correct thing to say, the socially appropriate response. Thank you. Ethan's voice was steady, but Victoria could hear the weight behind it, years of weight. It's been 4 years now. Some days are easier than others. Victoria didn't know what to say to that. She'd built her entire life around knowing exactly what to say in every situation, but genuine human grief was foreign territory. Business loss she understood. Strategic setbacks she could navigate. But this kind of pain, the kind that lived in a person's bones and changed the shape of their world, she had no reference for. Victoria gestured vaguely toward the ballroom, toward the safety of familiar territory and meaningless conversations. Should probably eat something, Ethan finished, his tone gentle but firm. And maybe switch to water for a while. The words were so unexpected, so devoid of the careful deference she was used to, that Victoria actually laughed. It came out harsh and brittle. Are you seriously giving me advice right now? You do remember that I'm your boss, don't you? I do. Ethan met her eyes without flinching. But right now, you're also a person who's had too much to drink and is about to make herself sick. And as someone who's been there, I'm telling you that you'll thank yourself tomorrow if you slow down now. Victoria wanted to be angry, wanted to put this presumptuous employee in his place with a few cutting words. But there was something in his voice, something that sounded like actual concern rather than judgment, that stopped her. I don't need a babysitter, she said instead, but the fight had gone out of her voice. Didn't say you did. Ethan picked up a glass of water from a nearby table and held it out to her. Just offering some friendly advice. You can take it or leave it. Victoria stared at the water like it was a foreign object. When was the last time someone had offered her something without expecting something in return? When was the last time someone had looked at her and seen a person instead of a CEO, a checkbook, a stepping stone to their own ambitions? She took the water. It was cool and clean and made the champagne taste like regret in her mouth. Victoria drank half the glass, then set it down on the window ledge. Thank you, she said quietly, the words unfamiliar on her tongue. You're welcome. Ethan smiled, and it transformed his entire face. For what it's worth, Ms. Hale, you look like you could use a break from all this. He gestured at the ballroom, at the performing people in their expensive clothes. It's exhausting, isn't it, being on all the time? Victoria felt something crack in her chest. This stranger, this employee whose name she'd never known until 5 minutes ago, had just articulated the truth she'd been running from for years. It was exhausting. Soul-crushingly, relentlessly exhausting. I don't have the luxury of not being on, she heard herself say. People expect what you give them, Ethan interrupted gently. But what do you expect from yourself? When you're alone, when there's no one watching, who are you then? The question hit Victoria like a physical blow. When she was alone, she was nothing. An empty apartment, a silent phone, a woman who'd traded every human connection for professional success and called it a victory. She reached for another glass of champagne. Okay. Ethan's voice was still gentle, but there was steel underneath now. I think maybe it's time to call it a night. Excuse me? You're done, Ms. Hale. You've made your appearance, written your check, proven whatever you needed to prove. Now you need to go home before you do something that ends up in Cynthia Blackwood's column tomorrow morning. Victoria's eyes narrowed. You know who Cynthia is? I know she's been circling you all night like a shark that smells blood in the water. Ethan's jaw tightened. And I know that look in your eyes. You're about 2 drinks away from telling someone exactly what you think of them, and while it might feel good in the moment, tomorrow you'll regret it. He was right. God help her, this stranger was absolutely right. Victoria could feel the words building behind her teeth, all the rage and frustration and loneliness she kept locked away, threatening to explode outward. One more drink, one more condescending comment from someone like Cynthia or Gerald or Thomas, and she'd detonate. And then they'd really have something to write about. I can't leave, Victoria said, but even she could hear how weak it sounded. I'm the guest of honor. I'm expected to stay until you're falling down drunk and everyone's talking about it? Ethan shook his head. Better to leave now while you can still walk out with your head up. I don't even have my driver. The words came out small, defeated. Victoria had sent him home hours ago, planning to call him when the event ended, but her phone was somewhere in her clutch, and the thought of digging through her bag while the room spun felt insurmountable. Ethan was quiet for a moment, studying her face. Then he made a decision. I'll drive you. What? No, you can't. I can't. Ms. Hale. He said her name with a patience that felt almost parental. You need to get home safely. You can either accept my help or I can find James Hartley and make it his problem. Your choice. The thought of James seeing her like this, really seeing her, not just catching a glimpse across the ballroom, made Victoria want to die of shame. At least this stranger was just that. A stranger. Someone who didn't know her well enough to be disappointed. Fine, she whispered. Fine. Take me home. Ethan nodded once. All business now. Wait here. I'll get our coats and bring the car around to the side entrance. Less chance of running into anyone that way. He disappeared into the crowd before Victoria could change her mind. She stood in her quiet corner, glass of water in hand, watching the party continue without her. Nobody noticed she was leaving. Nobody noticed her at all. In a room full of hundreds of people who claimed to know her, admire her, want to be her, not a single one looked her way as she prepared to slip out into the night. Victoria drained the water and set the glass down carefully. Her hands were still shaking. 5 minutes later, Ethan reappeared with both their coats and a look of grim determination. "Ready?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. They made it to the side entrance without incident, though Victoria's heels felt like stilts and her gown kept trying to trip her. The cold October air hit her face like a slap, shocking and clarifying. She breathed it in deeply, feeling some of the fog lift from her brain. Ethan's car was a modest Honda sedan, at least 10 years old, with a car seat visible in the back. The sight of it, so utterly normal, so completely divorced from her world of town cars and private jets, almost made Victoria laugh again. "It's not much," Ethan said, opening the passenger door for her, "but it's clean and it runs." Victoria gathered her expensive gown and folded herself into the passenger seat. The interior smelled like coffee and children's fruit snacks. Wholesome and lived in and completely alien to someone whose own car was leased and detailed weekly and never held anything more personal than her laptop bag. Ethan climbed in behind the wheel and started the engine. Soft rock played from the stereo at low volume, something old and familiar that Victoria couldn't quite place. "Address?" he asked. Victoria gave him her building's name and he nodded in recognition. Of course he did. It was one of the most expensive addresses in Chicago, the kind of place you couldn't help but know even if you'd never set foot inside. They pulled away from the Grandeur Hotel, leaving the lights and laughter behind. Victoria watched the city slide past her window, her city, the one she'd conquered and claimed and built her empire in. From street level, it looked different, smaller somehow, more human. Neither of them spoke for the first few minutes. Victoria was grateful for the silence, for the space to simply exist without performing. She rested her forehead against the cool glass of the window and tried to remember the last time she'd sat in a car this quiet, this peaceful. "How old is your daughter?" The question escaped before Victoria could stop it. Ethan glanced at her in surprise. 6. Her name's Lily. She's the reason for the car seat. Yeah. A smile touched his lips, sad and sweet at the same time. She's with my sister-in-law tonight. They're probably watching Frozen for the 100th time and eating ice cream they're not supposed to have before bed. Victoria tried to imagine this man's life, coming home to a 6-year-old daughter, reading bedtime stories, navigating homework and skinned knees, and the devastating grief of losing a wife while raising a child alone. It was so far removed from her own experience that it might as well have been science fiction. "That sounds nice," she said quietly. "It is." Ethan's hands were steady on the wheel, his eyes on the road. "It's messy and exhausting, and sometimes I have no idea what I'm doing. But it's nice. It's real. Real." When was the last time anything in Victoria's life had been real? Not curated, not strategic, not performed for an audience, or calculated for maximum effect. Just real. "I don't have anything like that," Victoria heard herself confess, the alcohol loosening her tongue. No family waiting at home, no ice cream before bed, just silence. Ethan didn't respond immediately, and Victoria wondered if she'd said too much, revealed too much, shown too much vulnerability to someone who was technically her employee. But when he finally spoke, his voice held only understanding. "Silence can be peaceful, or it can be deafening. Depends on whether you chose it or it chose you." "I chose it," Victoria said automatically. Then, more honestly, "I thought I chose it. I thought if I worked hard enough, succeeded enough, built something meaningful enough, I'd be too busy to feel alone. Turns out you can build an empire and still come home to an empty apartment." "Yeah." Ethan's voice was soft. "You really can." They drove in silence again, but this time it felt different. Companionable rather than awkward. Like two people who'd both learned the same hard lessons and didn't need to explain themselves to each other. The city lights blurred past, gold and white and red, painting abstract patterns across the windshield. Victoria closed her eyes and let the motion of the car lull her into something approaching calm. For the first time all night, maybe for the first time in months, she wasn't performing, wasn't calculating, wasn't being Victoria Hale, CEO. She was just a tired woman in a stranger's car, letting someone else do the driving for once. "Why are you helping me?" she asked without opening her eyes. "You don't know me. I don't know you. You could have just left me there." Ethan was quiet for so long Victoria thought he might not answer. When he did, his voice carried the weight of experience. 4 years ago, when my wife died, I spent about 6 months trying to drink away the pain. It didn't work, but I tried anyway. He paused at a red light, the glow washing over both of them. One night, I was at a bar downtown, absolutely wrecked, about to drive home drunk because I didn't care enough about my own life to make better choices. And the bartender, this guy I'd never met before, he took my keys, just took them right out of my hand and called me a cab. I was furious, told him to mind his own business, that I was fine. "But you weren't fine," Victoria said quietly. "No, I really wasn't." The light turned green. That bartender probably saved my life that night, or at least saved me from making a choice I couldn't take back, and I never even got his name. "So tonight, you're paying it forward." Something like that. Ethan's smile was sad. "I know what it looks like when someone's drowning, Miss Hale. And I know what it's like when everyone around you is too polite or too scared or too wrapped up in their own agenda to throw you a lifeline." The words settled into Victoria's chest, heavy and true. Everyone at that gala tonight had seen her drinking too much, teetering on the edge, and not one of them had done anything except whisper and watch and wait to see if she'd fall. Except this stranger. This man with his modest car and his daughter and his quiet, unshakable decency. "Thank you," Victoria said, and meant it more than she'd meant anything in years. They arrived at her building minutes later, a gleaming tower of steel and glass that rose 40 stories into the Chicago night. The doorman recognized her immediately despite the late hour, rushing to open the car door before she could reach for the handle herself. "Ms. Hale, welcome home. Shall I help you inside?" "I've got her," Ethan said, appearing at Victoria's elbow before she could respond. He offered his arm, and after a moment's hesitation, she took it. They walked through the marble lobby in silence, past tasteful modern art and a fountain that cost more than most people's houses. The elevator arrived instantly. It always did for the penthouse floor. Victoria pressed her key card to the scanner, and they rose smoothly upward, leaving the ground behind. "You don't have to walk me all the way up," Victoria said, but she didn't let go of his arm. "I know." Ethan watched the floor numbers climb. "But I'm going to anyway." The elevator opened directly into Victoria's penthouse, 8,000 square feet of minimalist luxury with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. It was beautiful in the way a museum was beautiful, perfect, untouchable, devoid of any sign that an actual person lived there. Ethan helped Victoria to the kitchen, where she collapsed onto a bar stool with less grace than she would have liked. He filled a glass with water from the fridge and set it in front of her, then found the aspirin in her medicine cabinet like he'd lived there for years. "Take 2 now. Have a full glass of water before bed, and you'll thank yourself tomorrow morning," he instructed, his tone gentle but firm. Victoria obeyed without argument. The water was cold and clean, washing away the last taste of champagne. She felt hollowed out, exhausted, stripped of every defense she'd spent years building. "I should go," Ethan said, but he didn't move toward the elevator. "Are you going to be okay?" The question was so simple, so genuinely caring that Victoria almost started crying. When was the last time someone had asked if she was okay and actually wanted to hear the answer? "I don't know," she admitted, staring at her water glass. "I thought I was building something meaningful, something that mattered. But all I've really built is this." She gestured at the pristine apartment, at the life that looked perfect from the outside and felt like nothing from the inside. Ethan leaned against the counter, his expression thoughtful. "You know what I learned after Sarah died? Success doesn't mean anything if you're too alone to enjoy it. Money doesn't matter if you have no one to spend it with. And all the achievements in the world don't fill the silence when you come home at night." "So what does fill it?" Victoria looked up at him, desperate for an answer. "Connection. Real connection with real people." He smiled sadly. It's the hardest thing and the most important thing. It's what I'm trying to teach my daughter, that people matter more than anything else, that showing up for each other is what makes life worth living. Victoria thought about her life, about the choices she'd made and the bridges she'd burned. What if you've forgotten how? To connect, to show up. What if you've been alone so long you don't remember how to be anything else? Then you learn. Ethan's voice was steady, certain. It's never too late to learn. He straightened up, preparing to leave. Get some rest, Ms. Hale. Drink more water, and maybe take tomorrow morning slow if you can afford to. Victoria, she said suddenly, you saved me from public humiliation tonight. You drove me home and made sure I was okay. I think you've earned the right to call me Victoria. Ethan smiled, a real smile this time, warm and genuine. Victoria, then. Good night. Wait. Victoria stood, swaying slightly. Why did you really help me tonight? And don't say it's because of the bartender. There's more to it than that. He studied her for a long moment, deciding how much truth to offer. Finally, he spoke. Because I saw someone who was hurting and hiding it. Someone who'd convinced everyone around her that she was invincible. So successfully that no one bothered to check if she was okay. His eyes were sad. I know what that feels like. And I couldn't just walk away. Victoria felt something shift in her chest, a crack in the armor she'd spent so long building, letting in a sliver of light she hadn't realized she'd been missing. Thank you, Ethan Cole, she said quietly, for seeing me when everyone else was looking away. You're welcome, Victoria Hale. He moved toward the elevator, then paused. One more thing. What you're feeling right now, the loneliness, the emptiness, it doesn't have to be permanent. You made choices that led you here. You can make different choices that lead you somewhere else. And then he was gone, the elevator doors closing behind him, leaving Victoria alone in her perfect, empty apartment with his words echoing in the silence. She stood there for a long time, still wearing her crimson gown and her diamonds, watching the city lights shimmer through her windows. Tomorrow, she'd wake up and be Victoria Hale again, CEO, billionaire, woman who needed nothing and no one. She'd face the board meeting and the merger crisis and whatever damage Thomas Whitmore had done. She'd put her armor back on and go to war. But tonight, for just a little while longer, she let herself be what she really was, a woman who'd achieved everything she'd ever wanted and discovered it wasn't nearly enough. Victoria walked to her bedroom, leaving a trail of expensive accessories behind her. Earrings on the kitchen counter, bracelet on the hall table, shoes kicked off near the door. She fell into bed still wearing her gown, too tired and drunk and emotionally raw to care about proper nighttime routines. As sleep pulled her under, her last conscious thought was of Ethan Cole's kind eyes and steady hands, of the way he'd helped her without expecting anything in return, of the possibility, however faint, however terrifying, that maybe she didn't have to be alone after all. Outside her windows, Chicago slept and woke and lived and breathed, a city full of people and stories and connections she'd spent 15 years ignoring in her single-minded pursuit of success. Tomorrow, things would look different. Tomorrow, something would change. Tonight, for the first time in years, Victoria Hale fell asleep with the memory of genuine human kindness warming her in the darkness. The headache arrived before consciousness did. Victoria woke to sunlight stabbing through her floor-to-ceiling windows like accusations, each ray a reminder of last night's spectacular lack of judgment. Her mouth tasted like regret, and expensive champagne gone sour. Her crimson gown was twisted around her body like a silk straitjacket, and one of her false eyelashes had come loose, tickling her cheek with every breath. For a long moment, she simply lay there, taking inventory of the damage. Her head pounded, her stomach churned, her pride felt like it had been put through a shredder. And then the memories came flooding back. The gala, the drinking, Cynthia Blackwood's poisonous observations, the way the room had started spinning, and Ethan Cole, steady, kind Ethan Cole, catching her before she fell, driving her home, making sure she was safe when everyone else had been too busy protecting their own interests to care. Oh, God, Victoria groaned into her pillow. She'd let an employee see her drunk, not just tipsy or pleasantly buzzed, but genuinely, messily intoxicated. She'd confessed her loneliness to a man whose name she hadn't known 12 hours ago. She'd let him drive her home, walk her to her door, see her pristine apartment, and all the emptiness it represented. Victoria forced herself upright, ignoring the way her skull felt like it was splitting open. The clock on her nightstand read 7:47 a.m. She had 13 minutes to pull herself together before the board meeting that would determine whether Hale Industries survived Thomas Whitmore's sabotage. The shower was scalding hot and punishingly efficient. Victoria stood under the spray, letting it wash away the physical evidence of last night while her mind raced through damage control scenarios. What had Ethan seen? What would he tell people? Did anyone else know he'd driven her home? Had anyone taken photos of her stumbling out of the gala? By the time she stepped out of the shower, Victoria had constructed a plan. She'd pretend last night never happened. She'd avoid Ethan Cole like he carried the plague. She'd focus on the merger crisis and let her professional excellence erase any doubts about her competence. In a week, maybe two, the gala would be forgotten, and she could go back to being invincible. She dressed in her armor, a charcoal Tom Ford suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent, Louboutin heels that added 3 inches to her height, and enough perfectly applied makeup to hide the shadows under her eyes. By the time Victoria looked in the mirror, she saw exactly what she wanted to see: a woman in complete control. The penthouse elevator delivered her to the private garage where her driver waited with the town car, engine already running. "Good morning, Ms. Hale," Marcus said, opening her door with practiced precision. If he noticed anything unusual about her appearance or demeanor, his professional mask didn't crack. "Straight to the office?" "Yes, and Marcus, last night, I picked you up from the Grandeur at 11:30 p.m. exactly as scheduled," Marcus interrupted smoothly, meeting her eyes in the rearview mirror with perfect understanding. "Traffic was light. You were home by midnight." Victoria felt a wave of gratitude so intense it almost brought tears to her eyes. Marcus had been her driver for 6 years. He'd seen her at her best and her worst, and he'd never once betrayed her trust. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Ma'am." He nodded once, and the lie became truth through mutual agreement. The drive to Hale Industries headquarters took 23 minutes in morning traffic. Victoria spent every one of them preparing for war, reviewing the leaked merger details on her tablet and constructing her counter-strategy. By the time they pulled up to the gleaming steel tower that bore her family name, she was ready. The lobby was already bustling with employees arriving for the day. Victoria strode through them like a queen among peasants, her heels clicking against marble with military precision. People scrambled out of her way, offering nervous good mornings that she acknowledged with the barest nod. This was her kingdom. These were her subjects. And she was about to remind everyone why crossing Victoria Hale was a career-ending mistake. "Ms. Hale!" Her assistant Rebecca appeared at her elbow the moment the elevator doors opened on the executive floor. "James needs to see you immediately. The board is already gathering, and Thomas Whitmore's people have been calling all morning. Tell them I'm unavailable. Forever, preferably." Victoria swept into her corner office, Rebecca scurrying behind her. "Get me everything we have on the merger. Every document, every email, every conversation. I want to know exactly what Thomas leaked and where he got it." "Already done. It's all on your desk." Rebecca hesitated. "Ms. Hale, there's something else. There was a photo." Victoria's blood turned to ice. "What kind of photo?" "From the gala last night. Someone posted it to social media around 11 p.m. It's you near the windows, and the angle makes it look like—" Rebecca winced. "Like you might have been drinking quite a bit. Cynthia Blackwood shared it with a caption about Chicago's ice queen melting under pressure." Of course. Of course, Cynthia had gotten her claws into something. Victoria forced herself to breathe through the spike of panic. "How many shares?" "About 2,000 before we flagged it and had it removed for privacy violations. But screenshots exist." 2,000. Not catastrophic, but not good either. Enough to plant seeds of doubt, to make people whisper, to give her enemies ammunition. "Handle it," Victoria said coldly. "Our usual channels? Discredit the source, question the timing, remind people that charity galas serve alcohol, and attending one doesn't constitute a scandal. Make it boring, and it'll die." Already in progress. PR is drafting a statement positioning you as a dedicated philanthropist who stayed late supporting the cause. "Good. Now leave me. I have a company to save." Rebecca fled. Victoria stood at her windows overlooking Chicago. The city spread below her like a map of conquest. She'd built this. Every floor of this building, every employee, every dollar of market value. It was hers through sheer force of will and relentless ambition. She wasn't going to let Thomas Whitmore or Cynthia Blackwood or her own momentary weakness tear it down. Her phone buzzed, a text from James. Boardroom, now. It's worse than we thought. Victoria grabbed her tablet and headed for war. The boardroom was chaos barely contained in expensive suits. 12 board members sat around the massive conference table, their voices overlapping in barely controlled panic. James stood at the head of the table looking like he'd aged 5 years overnight. Victoria's entrance silenced them immediately. "Good morning," she said, her voice cutting through the room like a blade. "I understand we have a situation." "A situation?" Edward Chen, the oldest board member and her father's former business partner, looked apoplectic. "Victoria, half our merger strategy is on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. Our stock is down 4% in pre-market trading. Our competitors know our entire negotiating position." "I'm aware." Victoria took her seat at the head of the table with deliberate calm. "Which is why we're going to pivot." "Pivot?" Another board member, Susan Martinez, shook her head. "Victoria, there's no pivoting from this. Whitmore gutted us. He knows our bottom line, our timeline, everything. We've lost all negotiating power." "We've lost the power of secrecy," Victoria corrected. "We haven't lost the power of being right. Our merger proposal is sound. The synergies are real. The projected growth is conservative, if anything. So what if they know our strategy? Let them. We'll negotiate in the open and prove that our position is unassailable." "That's insane," Edward sputtered. "You can't negotiate a billion-dollar merger with complete transparency." "Watch me." Victoria opened her tablet, her fingers flying across the screen. "James, get our lawyers on the line. Susan, I want a press release ready in 30 minutes positioning this leak as evidence of our confidence in the deal. Edward, call the other company's CEO directly. Tell him we're prepared to present our complete proposal to his board this afternoon with full disclosure of our position." "Victoria," James said carefully, "this is incredibly risky. If you're wrong, I'm not wrong." She looked around the table, meeting each board member's eyes in turn. Thomas Whitmore made a tactical error. He assumed that exposing our strategy would weaken us. Instead, it's going to prove that we have nothing to hide, that our numbers are solid, that Hale Industries doesn't play games because we don't need to. Slowly, reluctantly, heads began to nod. This was why they'd kept her as CEO despite her youth, despite her abrasive style, despite everything. When Victoria Hale made a decision, she made it with such absolute certainty that people couldn't help but believe her. The meeting lasted 3 hours. By the end, Victoria had restructured their entire approach, turning Whitmore's attack into an opportunity to demonstrate strength. She was brilliant and ruthless and completely in control, every inch the CEO who'd tripled her company's value in 5 years. It was almost enough to make her forget about last night. Almost. She was reviewing contracts in her office around 2 p.m. when Rebecca knocked tentatively. "Ms. Hale? There's someone here to see you. He says it's personal." Victoria didn't look up from her screen. "I don't take personal meetings during business hours. You know that." "I did tell him that. He said to tell you it's about last night." Victoria's fingers froze on the keyboard. Last night. It could only be one person. "Send him away, she said, her voice flat. "Whatever he wants, I'm not available." "Ms. Hale, he's very insistent, and he seems concerned. He said he just wanted to make sure you were all right after I said send him away, Rebecca." Victoria's tone could have frozen lava. "I don't care how insistent he is. I don't care what he wants. I don't see employees without appointments, and I certainly don't discuss my personal life at the office." There was a long pause. Then Rebecca said quietly, "He also said to tell you that kindness doesn't require an appointment." The words hit Victoria like a physical blow. She remembered Ethan's steady hands, his patient voice, the way he'd helped her without asking for anything in return. And now he was here, checking on her, and she was hiding behind her assistant like a coward. 5 minutes, Victoria heard herself say. "He gets 5 minutes, and then I have a call with Tokyo." "Yes, ma'am." Rebecca disappeared. Victoria stood and smoothed her suit, checking her reflection in the glass wall of her office. She looked perfect, untouchable. Nothing like the woman who'd stumbled out of a gala last night needing help to walk straight. When Ethan Cole entered her office, the contrast was almost comical. He wore khakis and a button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up, his employee badge clipped to his belt. He looked tired, probably because she'd kept him out until nearly midnight, but his eyes held the same steady kindness she remembered from the night before. "Mr. Cole?" Victoria said coolly, not offering him a seat. "I'm very busy. What is this about?" If her tone bothered him, he didn't show it. "I wanted to make sure you were okay. Last night was rough." "Last night was a private matter that has no bearing on my professional life," Victoria replied, her voice arctic, "and I'd appreciate it if you'd keep it that way." "I'm not here to gossip, Ms. Hale. I'm here because I was worried." "Well, as you can see, I'm fine. Perfectly fine. Thank you for your concern, but it's unnecessary." Ethan studied her for a long moment, and Victoria had the uncomfortable feeling that he could see right through her carefully constructed armor. "You know," he said slowly, "when Sarah died, I spent months telling everyone I was fine. I went to work, took care of Lily, smiled when I was supposed to smile. And everyone believed me because it was easier than dealing with the truth. I'm not interested in your personal history, Mr. Cole." "One person didn't believe me," he continued, as if she hadn't spoken. "Sarah's sister, Emily. She showed up at my door one night and said, 'You can lie to everyone else, but don't lie to me. Don't lie to yourself.' It was the first honest conversation I'd had in months, and it probably saved my life." Victoria felt her carefully maintained composure starting to crack. "What exactly do you want from me?" "Nothing." His answer was simple, honest. "I don't want anything. I just wanted to tell you that last night happened, and pretending it didn't won't make it go away, and that if you ever need someone to talk to, someone who won't judge you or use it against you, I'm around." "That's very presumptuous of you." "Probably." Ethan smiled faintly. "But I've learned that sometimes people need someone to be presumptuous, to push past the walls and offer help even when it's not wanted. I didn't ask for your help last night, and I'm not asking for it now." "I know. You didn't have to ask, that's the point." He moved toward the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, Ms. Hale, the woman I met last night, the real one, not the CEO, she was a lot more interesting than the Ice Queen everyone's afraid of." And with that, he was gone, leaving Victoria standing in her corner office feeling more exposed than she'd felt in years. She wanted to be angry, wanted to fire him for his insolence, for his presumption, for daring to see her as anything other than his boss. But underneath the anger was something else, something that felt dangerously like relief. Because Ethan Cole had seen her at her absolute worst, and instead of using it against her or running away, he'd come back to make sure she was okay. When was the last time anyone had done that? Victoria returned to her desk, but the contract suddenly seemed impossible to focus on. Her mind kept drifting back to Ethan's words, to the way he'd looked at her with concern instead of judgment, to the possibility that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to carry everything alone. The Tokyo call came and went. So did meetings with legal, with PR, with the executive team. Victoria performed flawlessly in all of them, her reputation as an unshakable leader firmly intact. By 7 p.m., when most of the office had cleared out, she'd successfully contained the merger crisis and turned Whitmore's attack into a strategic advantage. She should have felt triumphant. Instead, she felt hollow. Victoria stood at her windows watching the city lights flicker to life as Chicago transitioned from day to night. Somewhere out there, Ethan Cole was probably making dinner for his daughter, helping with homework, reading bedtime stories, living a life that was messy and real and full of connection. And here she was, alone in her tower, surrounded by success and drowning in silence. Her phone rang. Rebecca, calling from home. "Ms. Hale, I'm sorry to bother you after hours, but Cynthia Blackwood just published her column for tomorrow. It mentions you." Victoria's stomach dropped. "How bad?" "Not as bad as it could be. She focuses mostly on the merger leak and your brilliant response. But there's a line at the end. One wonders if Chicago's indomitable CEO is as unshakable in private as she appears in public. This reporter has her doubts." "Subtle as a brick," Victoria muttered. "Should I have our team respond?" "No, let it go. Responding gives it oxygen." Victoria rubbed her temples. "Anything else?" "Actually, yes. That employee who came to see you today, Ethan Cole? I looked him up in our system. Rebecca paused. Ms. Ali, did you know his wife died in a car accident 4 years ago? A drunk driver hit them head on. She died instantly. He and his daughter survived with minor injuries. The words landed like punches. A drunk driver. Ethan had spent last night helping a woman who'd had too much to drink get home safely, even though drunk driving had destroyed his family. He'd done it anyway, with kindness and patience and grace. Thank you, Rebecca, Victoria managed. That's all for tonight. She ended the call and sat down heavily in her chair. The enormity of what Ethan had done, what it must have cost him emotionally, suddenly overwhelmed her. He could have let her make her own way home, could have walked away and let her face the consequences of her choices. Instead, he'd relived his own trauma to keep her safe. Victoria pulled up the employee directory on her computer, searching for Ethan Cole. His file was sparse. 6 years with the company, stellar performance reviews, no disciplinary issues. His direct supervisor noted that he was reliable, innovative, and well-liked by colleagues, but turned down promotions that would require travel because of his daughter. There was a work photo attached to the file. Ethan smiled at the camera with genuine warmth, so different from the forced professional smiles Victoria was used to seeing. He looked like exactly what he was, a good man doing his best in difficult circumstances. Before she could talk herself out of it, Victoria composed an email. Mr. Cole, thank you for checking on me today. I apologize for my curtness. Yesterday evening was not my finest moment, and I'm not accustomed to being seen in such a vulnerable state. I want you to know that I appreciate what you did more than I can adequately express. Your kindness was unexpected and undeserved, and I will not forget it. If there is anything I can do to repay the favor, please don't hesitate to ask. Regards, Victoria Hale. She read it 3 times, deleted it twice, and finally hit send before she could overthink it further. It was the most honest communication she'd sent in years. No corporate speak, no strategic positioning, just genuine gratitude. The response came 15 minutes later. Ms. Hale, no apology necessary and no repayment required. Sometimes we all need help. I'm glad I could be there when you needed it. If you ever want to grab coffee and talk as regular people instead of CEO and employee, I'd enjoy that. No agenda, no expectations, just conversation. Take care of yourself, Ethan. Ethan. Victoria stared at the message for a long time. Coffee. Conversation. As regular people. The idea was so foreign it might as well have been written in another language. She didn't have coffee with employees. She didn't have personal friendships at work. She kept her professional and personal lives completely separate, assuming she even had a personal life to keep separate. But Ethan wasn't asking for professional networking or career advancement. He was offering something much simpler and infinitely more valuable, genuine human connection. Victoria started typing a response 3 different times and deleted all of them. What did you say to an invitation like that? How did you accept when you'd forgotten how to be anything other than a CEO? In the end, she wrote, I'll think about it. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. And for Victoria Hale, that was progress. She worked until nearly 10 p.m., then finally called Marcus for a ride home. The penthouse felt even emptier than usual when she walked in, her footsteps echoing off marble floors and designer furniture that had never been sat in. Victoria poured herself a glass of water, no champagne, not tonight, and stood at her windows overlooking the city. Ethan's words kept echoing in her mind. The woman I met last night, the real one, she was a lot more interesting than the ice queen everyone's afraid of. Who was the real Victoria Hale? She'd spent so long being the CEO, the boss, the woman in charge, that she'd forgotten there might be anything else underneath. Or maybe there wasn't. Maybe she'd sacrificed so much of herself on the altar of success that nothing remained but the title and the corner office and the loneliness she'd earned through single-minded ambition. Her phone buzzed with a text from James. Board is thrilled with how you handled today. Merger back on track. You're a miracle worker. Victoria didn't feel like a miracle worker. She felt tired and confused and strangely empty despite her professional victory. Another text came through, this one from a number she didn't recognize. This is Ethan. Got your number from the employee directory. Hope that's okay. Just wanted to say that offer for coffee stands whenever you're ready. No pressure. Sleep well? Victoria stared at the message for a long time. Then, before she could overthink it, she typed, "How's Friday afternoon? There's a cafe near the office." 3 p.m.? The response was immediate. Perfect. See you then. Victoria set down her phone and released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. She'd just made plans to have coffee with an employee. Not a strategic meeting, not a professional obligation. Just coffee, like a normal person. The thought terrified her, but it also felt like the first real choice she'd made in years. Not for Hale Industries, not for her reputation, not for her career. Just for herself. For the possibility that maybe there was more to life than winning, more to existence than success, more to her than the armor she wore to work every day. Victoria finished her water and headed to bed, her mind still spinning with everything that had happened. The gala, the merger crisis, Ethan's unexpected kindness, and even more unexpected invitation. She should have been exhausted, but instead she felt strangely alert, like she was standing on the edge of something she couldn't quite name. As she drifted off to sleep, her last thought was of Ethan's smile, genuine and warm and completely devoid of calculation. It had been so long since someone had smiled at her like that. Like she was worth knowing, not just worth using. Maybe, she thought drowsily, it was time to remember how to be a person instead of just a position. Maybe it was time to let someone see her again, really see her, and trust that they wouldn't use what they saw as a weapon. Maybe it was time to stop being quite so alone. The days between Tuesday and Friday moved with excruciating slowness, each one stretching longer than the last as Victoria found herself watching the clock in a way she hadn't done since high school. It was ridiculous, she told herself repeatedly. It was just coffee, with an employee who'd done her a favor, nothing more complicated than that. Except it felt complicated. Everything about Ethan Cole felt complicated in ways Victoria couldn't quite articulate. Wednesday brought another triumph. The merger negotiations concluded successfully, with Hale Industries securing even better terms than originally projected. The board was ecstatic. The stock price jumped 7%. Thomas Whitmore's sabotage had backfired so spectacularly that he'd become a cautionary tale whispered in corporate corridors across Chicago. Victoria should have been celebrating. Instead, she kept checking her phone for messages that hadn't arrived, wondering if Ethan would cancel their Friday meeting, half hoping he would so she could retreat back into the familiar safety of isolation. Thursday afternoon, she was reviewing quarterly reports when Rebecca knocked softly. "Ms. Hale? There's a delivery for you at reception." Victoria glanced up, irritated by the interruption. "I didn't order anything." "It's not from a store. The card says it's from someone in engineering." Rebecca's expression was carefully neutral, but Victoria caught the flicker of curiosity in her eyes. Her heart did something uncomfortable in her chest. "Bring it up." 2 minutes later, Rebecca returned carrying a small potted plant. Nothing exotic or expensive, just a simple succulent in a terracotta pot with a handwritten note attached. "Thought your office could use something alive. These are hard to kill, even if you forget about them. Much like second chances." Victoria stared at the plant for a long moment, something warm and unfamiliar unfurling in her chest. Her office was a study in minimalist perfection, glass, steel, leather, nothing soft or living or remotely personal. The little succulent looked absurdly out of place on her pristine desk, its green leaves somehow defiant against all the corporate sterility. She should have sent it back, should have maintained professional boundaries, should have done a dozen things that the old Victoria, the one from just a week ago, would have done without hesitation. Instead, she found herself moving it to the corner of her desk where sunlight from the floor-to-ceiling windows could reach it. "That's lovely," Rebecca ventured carefully. "Should I send a thank you note to Mr. Cole?" "No," Victoria said quickly. I'll thank him myself." After Rebecca left, Victoria pulled out her phone and typed, "The plant is perfect. My office has never had anything living in it before. Thank you." Ethan's response came within minutes. "Everyone needs something to take care of, even terrifying CEOs. Still on for tomorrow?" "Yes," she typed back, then stared at the single word for several seconds before adding, "I'm looking forward to it." It was the most honest thing she'd written in years. Friday arrived with crisp autumn sunshine, and Victoria's nerves wound so tight she thought she might snap. She changed outfits 3 times that morning, rejecting her usual severe suits in favor of something slightly softer, then rejecting that for being too obvious, then finally settling on tailored black pants and a dove-gray cashmere sweater that was professional but not armor-like. She left her hair down instead of pulled back in its customary severe bun. James noticed immediately when she emerged from her office for the 10 a.m. executive meeting. "You look different," he said, his tone carefully neutral. "I look the same as always." "No, you look softer somehow." His eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "Are you wearing different makeup?" "I'm wearing the same makeup I always wear, James. Can we focus on the agenda, please?" But his observation stayed with her throughout the morning. Softer. Was that what she was trying to be? And why did the thought terrify her so much? At 2:45 p.m., Victoria stood in front of her office mirror making final adjustments to her appearance. The woman staring back at her looked polished and composed, but there was something different in her eyes, something vulnerable that she couldn't quite hide. "This is insane," she muttered to her reflection. "You're the CEO of a billion-dollar company. You don't get nervous about coffee." But her hands were shaking slightly as she picked up her purse. The cafe Ethan had suggested was a small independent place 3 blocks from Hale Industries, the kind of spot Victoria had driven past 1,000 times without ever actually seeing. It was called the Daily Grind, with mismatched furniture and local art on the walls, and the smell of fresh roasted coffee beans filling the air. Nothing like the sleek corporate coffee shops Victoria usually frequented when she bothered with coffee at all. She arrived exactly on time. Punctuality was one of the few social skills she'd mastered, and found Ethan already waiting at a corner table, 2 cups of coffee already steaming in front of him. "I took a guess on your order," he said, standing when he saw her. "Americano, black, no sugar, but I can get you something else if I'm wrong." "You're not wrong." Victoria slid into the chair across from him, touched that he'd paid enough attention to remember. "How did you know?" "I noticed at the gala. You were drinking champagne all night, but I saw you with regular coffee earlier in the evening. Black, no additions." He smiled. "I'm observant. Comes with the territory of being a single dad. You learn to notice details." Victoria wrapped her hands around the warm cup, grateful for something to hold. "Thank you for the plant. It really is perfect." "I'm glad you like it. My daughter helped me pick it out, actually. Lily said it had to be green because green is a happy color." The mention of his daughter created a small silence. Victoria knew she should ask about Lily. That's what people did in normal conversations, showed interest in each other's lives. But she'd spent so long not asking personal questions that the words felt stuck in her throat. Ethan seemed to sense her discomfort. "This is weird, isn't it? Having coffee with your CEO?" "Extremely weird," Victoria admitted, surprised by her own honesty. "I don't usually do this. Actually, I never do this. I don't have personal relationships with employees." "Want to call it off? No hard feelings if you do." Victoria considered it for a moment. It would be easier to retreat, to go back to her office and her carefully controlled world where emotions were managed and relationships were transactional. But something made her shake her head. "No, I don't want to call it off. I'm not sure how to do this. How to be a regular person having regular coffee." "Well, we're already failing at regular," Ethan said, his eyes warm with amusement. "Regular people don't have to clarify that they're being regular. How about we just be honest instead? Honest is easier than regular." "Honest," Victoria tested the word, rolling it around in her mouth like unfamiliar food. "I'm not sure I remember how to be honest in a social setting. Everything I say at work is strategic. Everything I do is calculated for maximum impact." "Then let's start simple. I'll ask you a question, you answer honestly, then you ask me one. No strategy, no calculation, just truth." He took a sip of his coffee. "Deal?" "Deal," Victoria said, though her heart was racing. "Okay, first question. What did you want to be when you were a kid before you knew you'd run your father's company?" The question caught Victoria completely off guard. No one ever asked her about her childhood dreams, about the girl she'd been before ambition and expectation had shaped her into Victoria Hale, CEO. "A veterinarian," she heard herself say. "I loved animals. Had this whole fantasy about opening a clinic where I'd save injured wildlife and nurse them back to health." She laughed, but it came out bitter. My father told me that was impractical, that successful people didn't waste time on dreams that didn't generate revenue. That's heartbreaking, Ethan said quietly. That's reality. Victoria shrugged, uncomfortable with his sympathy. He wasn't wrong. I wouldn't have built Hale Industries if I'd been off saving injured raccoons. No, but you might have been happier. The words landed like stones in still water, ripples spreading outward. Victoria stared at her coffee, unable to meet his eyes. My turn to ask a question, she said, desperate to change the subject. What was your wife like? She regretted it immediately. It was too personal, too raw, too much for a first honest conversation, but Ethan didn't flinch. Sarah was sunshine, he said simply, one of those people who made everyone around her feel lighter just by existing. She taught second grade and loved every chaotic minute of it. When she laughed, it was this full-body thing that was completely contagious. His smile was sad and sweet. She would have hated that I spent 6 months trying to drink myself to death after she died. Would have kicked my ass for wasting time on grief when Lily needed me. How did you stop? Victoria asked, forgetting whose turn it was. How did you pull yourself out? Emily, Sarah's sister. She moved in with us for a while. Wouldn't let me spiral. And Lily, God, Lily saved me. She was only 2 when Sarah died. Too young to understand, but old enough to know her mom was gone. Every morning she'd wake up asking for Mama, and every morning I had to be present enough to help her through it. You can't drink yourself to death when a toddler needs breakfast. Victoria felt tears pricking at her eyes and blinked them back furiously. I'm sorry, that must have been impossibly hard. It was. Still is sometimes. Ethan met her eyes, but it taught me something important. The pain doesn't go away by avoiding it or numbing it. You have to feel it, walk through it, let it change you. And on the other side, if you're lucky, you find out you're stronger than you thought. I don't think I've ever felt anything that deeply, Victoria said quietly. I've spent my whole life avoiding exactly that kind of vulnerability. Is that why you were drinking so much at the gala? The question was gentle but direct. Victoria could have deflected, could have changed the subject, could have rebuilt her walls. Instead, she chose honesty. I was drinking because I was lonely, she admitted, the words coming out barely above a whisper. Because I was surrounded by hundreds of people and felt completely alone. Because I've built this perfect life that looks so good from the outside and feels so empty from the inside. And because drinking makes it easier to pretend I'm fine with that. Ethan didn't say anything for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was kind. Are you fine with it? No, Victoria said, and the admission felt like jumping off a cliff. No, I'm not fine with it at all, but I don't know how to change it. I don't know how to be anything other than what I am. What are you, Victoria? Really? She looked up at him, this man who'd shown her more genuine kindness in a week than most people had shown her in years. I'm terrified, she said honestly. I'm successful and powerful and absolutely terrified that this is all there is. That I've traded everything that matters for a corner office and a stock portfolio. That's not all you are, Ethan said firmly. You're also someone who gives millions to children's hospitals. Someone who turned her father's failing company into an empire. Someone who had the courage to accept help when she needed it, even though it went against every instinct. That wasn't courage. That was desperation. Sometimes they're the same thing. He leaned forward, his eyes intense. You asked how I pulled myself out of the darkness. Want to know the real answer? I let people help me. I stopped pretending I had to carry everything alone. I learned that asking for help isn't weakness. It's the strongest thing you can do. Victoria felt something crumbling inside her, some essential wall she'd spent decades building. I don't know how to ask for help. I don't even know what I'd ask for if I could. Start with something small, like having coffee with someone who wants to know the real you, not just the CEO. Ethan's smile was gentle. That's what we're doing right now, isn't it? You're asking for connection, even if you can't say the words out loud. They sat in silence for a moment, the cafe bustling around them with the ordinary rhythms of other people's lives. Victoria watched a young couple sharing a pastry, laughing over some private joke. Watched a student buried in textbooks, highlighter moving across pages with determined focus. Watched an elderly man reading the newspaper with reading glasses perched on his nose. Normal people, living normal lives, probably with normal problems and normal joys. Nothing like her existence in its glass tower. "Tell me about your daughter," Victoria said suddenly. "Tell me what a normal Friday afternoon looks like for you when you're not having existential coffee with your boss." Ethan's entire face transformed when he talked about Lily. He told Victoria about the elaborate games of pretend they played, where he was usually assigned the role of dragon or villain. About how Lily insisted on wearing her tutu to school at least twice a week, declaring that princesses didn't follow dress codes. About bedtime negotiations that would put corporate lawyers to shame, and the way she still sometimes crawled into his bed at night when she had bad dreams. "She's starting to ask more questions about Sarah," Ethan said, his expression turning thoughtful. "Wanting to know what her mom was like, what her favorite things were. I've been saving all these stories for when she's old enough to really understand. But it's hard, keeping someone alive through memory when you're still learning to live without them yourself." "You're doing it alone?" Victoria asked. "No one helping you?" "Emily helps when she can, but she has her own family now. And I have some good friends from Sarah's mom group who still check in. But yeah, mostly it's just me and Lily figuring it out as we go." He shrugged. "Some days I feel like I'm completely screwing it up. Other days I think maybe we're doing okay." "I think you're probably doing better than okay," Victoria said softly. "Your daughter is lucky to have you." "I'm lucky to have her." Ethan checked his watch, then grimaced. "Speaking of which, I need to pick her up from school in 40 minutes. Emily's been covering for me today, but Lily gets anxious if I'm late." Victoria felt an unexpected pang of disappointment. She wasn't ready for this conversation to end, wasn't ready to return to her office and her empty evening and the carefully controlled loneliness of her normal life. "Same time next week?" The words escaped before she could stop them. Ethan's smile was like sunrise. "I'd like that. Though maybe we could mix it up a bit. There's a park near here where I take Lily sometimes. If you're not opposed to fresh air and potential grass stains, you could join us for a Saturday morning. Nothing fancy, just feeding ducks and playing on swings." The invitation was so far outside Victoria's comfort zone it might as well have been on another planet. She didn't do parks, didn't do casual Saturday mornings, didn't spend time with employees' children while wearing jeans and risking grass stains. "I don't know if that's appropriate," she started to say. "Forget appropriate," Ethan interrupted gently. "Forget CEO and employee. Forget what people might think or how it might look. Do you want to come? Yes or no?" Victoria thought about her typical Saturday mornings, sleeping until 9, expensive brunch alone while reviewing work emails, maybe a personal training session at her private gym. Solitary, controlled, perfectly curated emptiness. "Yes," she heard herself say. "Yes, I'd like that." They exchanged phone numbers and made plans for the following Saturday. As Victoria walked back to her office, she felt lighter somehow, like she'd set down a weight she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. The autumn air was crisp and clean, and Chicago felt less like a city she'd conquered and more like a place where she actually lived. Her phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. "Thank you for being honest today. It means more than you probably know." Victoria stopped walking right there on the crowded sidewalk and felt tears burning in her eyes again. When was the last time someone had thanked her for honesty? When was the last time honesty had even been an option? She typed back, "Thank you for seeing me. The real me." I'd forgotten she existed. The reply came quickly. She's still there, just buried under a lot of expensive suits and corporate armor, but definitely still there. Victoria smiled, a real smile, not the calculated CEO smile she deployed at meetings and galas. People hurried past her on the sidewalk, wrapped up in their own lives and problems, and for once she didn't feel separate from them. For once, she felt like maybe she was part of the world instead of just observing it from her tower. Back at the office, James was waiting in her doorway, looking concerned. "Where were you? You missed the 3 o'clock with legal." "I had coffee," Victoria said, brushing past him into her office. "You had coffee? Victoria, that meeting was important. Reschedule it." She sat down at her desk, her eyes falling on the little succulent Ethan had sent. "I had something more important to do." James stared at her like she'd grown a second head. "Are you feeling all right? You never miss meetings. You never prioritize personal time over work. You never..." I know what I never do, James, Victoria interrupted, but her tone was gentle rather than sharp. Maybe it's time I started doing things differently. He studied her face for a long moment, and something in his expression softened. This is about that engineer, isn't it? Ethan Cole? Victoria's first instinct was to deny it, to rebuild her professional walls and shut down the conversation. But she was tired of walls, tired of pretending, tired of being alone. He's a good man, she said quietly. He helped me when he didn't have to, and he's teaching me that maybe there's more to life than quarterly earnings reports. Victoria. James sat down across from her, his voice careful. I'm not going to tell you how to live your life, but be careful, okay? Relationships with employees can get complicated, especially when you're the CEO. I know the risks, James. I'm not an idiot. I know you're not, but I also know you've been alone for a long time. And sometimes when people have been alone long enough, they make choices they wouldn't normally make just to feel connected to someone. His words hit closer to the truth than Victoria was comfortable admitting. Was that what she was doing? Latching on to the first person who'd shown her genuine kindness because she was desperate for connection? Maybe, she admitted, or maybe I'm just finally learning that success doesn't mean anything if you have no one to share it with. James was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled, a real smile, warm with genuine affection. Good. It's about damn time you figured that out. They rescheduled the legal meeting and worked until 7, but for once Victoria wasn't the last one to leave the office. She went home while it was still light out, ordered takeout instead of eating another protein bar at her desk, and spent the evening reading a novel she'd bought months ago but never opened. Saturday morning arrived cold and bright, the kind of October day that made Chicago feel like the most beautiful city in the world. Victoria stood in front of her closet for 20 minutes, staring at racks of designer business wear and evening gowns with nothing remotely appropriate for a park playdate with a 6-year-old. She finally settled on jeans she'd bought years ago and never worn, a soft blue sweater and her most casual shoes, which were still probably too nice for duck feeding but would have to do. She pulled her hair into a simple ponytail and skipped the makeup except for a touch of mascara. The woman in the mirror looked younger somehow, softer, more like the girl who'd dreamed of saving injured animals than the CEO who intimidated corporate sharks for breakfast. Ethan had suggested they meet at Lincoln Park at 10. Victoria arrived 15 minutes early. Old habits died hard, and found herself genuinely nervous in a way that had nothing to do with business negotiations or board presentations. She spotted them before they saw her. Ethan was pushing a little girl on a swing, her dark hair flying behind her as she shrieked with delighted laughter. The girl was all joy and energy, kicking her legs to go higher while Ethan pretended to struggle with the effort. Higher, Daddy, higher! Any higher and you'll end up in orbit. I want to go to orbit. Push me to space. Victoria watched them for a moment, something aching in her chest. This was what family looked like. This was what love looked like, when it wasn't complicated by corporate strategy or personal ambition. Just a father and daughter on a Saturday morning, creating joy out of nothing but each other's company. You made it! Ethan had spotted her. He slowed the swing down and helped Lily jump off. Lily, this is my friend Victoria. Victoria, this is Lily. Lily looked up at Victoria with huge brown eyes, taking in every detail with a child's unfiltered curiosity. You're really pretty. Are you a princess? Victoria couldn't help but laugh. No, sweetheart, I'm definitely not a princess. She could be a princess, Lily informed her father seriously. She has princess hair and a pretty smile. I think she's a secret princess. I think you might be right, Ethan agreed, his eyes meeting Victoria's with warmth and amusement. She does seem pretty magical. Victoria felt herself blushing like a teenager. I brought bread for the ducks, she said, pulling a bag from her purse. Your dad mentioned you like feeding them. Lily's entire face lit up. You brought duck bread. Daddy, she brought duck bread. She grabbed Victoria's hand without hesitation, small fingers warm and sticky. Come on, I'll show you where the best ducks are. They're really fat and they make funny sounds. And just like that, Victoria found herself being towed toward the pond by a 6-year-old tour guide who had very strong opinions about duck hierarchy and feeding strategies. The next 2 hours passed in a blur of simple pleasures Victoria had forgotten existed. They fed ducks. Lily was right. They were fat and made hilarious noises. They played on the swings, and Victoria discovered that flying through the air with the wind in your face felt exactly the same at 38 as it had at 8. They bought hot chocolate from a vendor, and Lily shared her marshmallows, even though Victoria protested she didn't need any. "Everyone needs marshmallows," Lily declared with the absolute certainty only 6-year-olds possess. "That's just science." "She's very wise for her age," Victoria told Ethan as they watched Lily chase pigeons with unbridled enthusiasm. "She has her moments. Other moments she's convinced her stuffed elephant is actually alive and has feelings that must be considered during bedtime negotiations." He smiled. "But yeah, she's pretty amazing, even when I'm completely biased." They sat on a bench while Lily played on the climbing structure, close enough to watch but far enough to talk privately. "This is nice," Victoria said softly. "I can't remember the last time I spent a morning doing absolutely nothing productive." "This is productive," Ethan corrected. "You're building memories, connecting with people, learning to be present. That's the most productive thing there is." "My board of directors would disagree." "Your board of directors probably don't know how to be present either. Too busy measuring productivity and profit margins." He turned to look at her. "You seem different today, more relaxed." "I am relaxed, I think." Victoria watched Lily hang upside down from a bar, her face red and happy. "Though I'm also terrified I'm going to somehow mess this up. I don't know how to interact with children. What if I say the wrong thing?" "Lily's 6. You could recite the phone book and she'd probably think it was fascinating as long as you used an entertaining voice." Ethan's expression grew more serious. "Besides, you're doing fine. Better than fine. She likes you." "How can you tell?" "She shared her marshmallows. That's the ultimate sign of Lily approval. Last week she told her teacher that sharing food is how you know someone is family." The word family hit Victoria with unexpected force. She'd never had that. Not really. Her parents had been more like business associates who happened to raise a child. No cousins, no siblings, no extended network of warmth and connection, just Victoria, alone with her achievements. "Daddy! Victoria!" Lily came running over, breathless and flushed. "Can we go see the dogs? There's a dog park and sometimes there are puppies." "Please?" Victoria added, surprising herself. "I'd love to see puppies." Ethan laughed and stood, offering his hand to help Victoria up. She took it, and for just a moment their fingers intertwined, warm and solid and real. They didn't let go right away. The dog park was chaos in the best possible way. Golden retrievers chased tennis balls with single-minded determination while their owners chatted on benches. A pair of corgis waddled past with the dignified air of small royalty. And in the puppy section, a litter of chocolate lab puppies tumbled over each other in a pile of velvet ears and wagging tails. Lily pressed her face against the fence, her entire body vibrating with excitement. "They're so cute I could die. Daddy, I'm actually going to die from how cute they are." "Please don't die," Ethan said solemnly. "The paperwork would be terrible." Victoria found herself laughing, really laughing, in a way she couldn't remember doing in years. There was something about Ethan's deadpan delivery combined with Lily's dramatic sincerity that bypassed all her carefully constructed defenses and hit something genuine underneath. "Can we go in?" Lily begged. "Please, please, please. I'll be so good. I'll eat all my vegetables for a whole week. I'll clean my room without being asked. I'll never argue about bedtime again." "That last one's a lie, and we both know it," Ethan interrupted, but he was already opening the gate. "Okay, but gentle hands. Remember what we talked about." Lily nodded seriously and immediately dropped to her knees as puppies swarmed her, licking her face and climbing into her lap. Her giggles were pure joy, unselfconscious and complete. Victoria hung back, uncertain. She'd never had pets growing up. Her father considered them messy distractions. As an adult, she'd been too busy building an empire to consider the responsibility of another living thing. "You can go in," Ethan said gently, reading her hesitation. "They won't bite. Well, they might nibble a little, but it's puppy nibbling. More cute than painful." "I don't know how," Victoria admitted quietly. I don't know how to play with puppies." Ethan's expression softened with understanding. "Just sit down. They'll handle the rest." So Victoria did something she never did. She sat down on the ground in her expensive jeans without worrying about grass stains or dirt, and let the world come to her instead of trying to control it. Within seconds, she had 3 puppies in her lap, their tiny bodies warm and squirming, their breath sweet and puppy-scented. One of them, a little female with a white patch on her chest, climbed up and licked Victoria's chin with enthusiastic affection. Something cracked open in Victoria's chest, some carefully sealed place that had been locked away for decades. She gathered the puppy close, feeling its heartbeat against her palm, and felt tears threatening again. "You okay?" Ethan asked softly, settling down beside her with his own arm full of puppies. "I'm fine," Victoria said automatically, then corrected herself. "No, that's not honest. I'm overwhelmed. This is a lot. Too much? We can go if you need to." "No." Victoria held the puppy closer. "Not too much. Just right. And that's what's overwhelming, realizing how much I've been missing. How many simple, perfect moments like this I've traded away for conference calls and quarterly reports." Lily crawled over, dragging puppies with her. "Victoria, do you have any pets at home?" "No, sweetheart, I don't." "That's so sad." Lily's face was a picture of genuine distress. "Everyone needs a pet. They keep you company and love you even when you're grumpy. Right, Daddy?" "Right, though we don't have a dog either, remember? Our apartment doesn't allow them." "But we have Mr. Whiskers," Lily pointed out. "He's a fish, but he still counts. He's a very good listener." "Mr. Whiskers is an excellent fish," Ethan agreed seriously. "Top-tier aquatic companion." Victoria watched them together, the easy affection and gentle teasing, and felt something she couldn't quite name, longing, maybe, or recognition of something she'd never had and was only now realizing she'd wanted all along. They stayed at the dog park for another hour, until Lily's energy finally started to flag and the puppies retreated to their mother for lunch. As they walked back through the park, Lily's hand found Victoria's again, small and trusting and completely natural. "Are you coming back next Saturday?" Lily asked hopefully. "Because we usually come to the park and sometimes we get ice cream after and you could come with us, if you want to." Victoria looked at Ethan over Lily's head, seeking permission or guidance, or maybe just reassurance that this was okay, that she wasn't overstepping some invisible boundary. "We'd love to have you," Ethan said, his eyes warm, "if your schedule allows." "My schedule allows," Victoria said, making a decision that would have shocked her entire board of directors. "I'd really like that." Lily's answering smile was like sunshine breaking through clouds. They said goodbye at the park entrance, Lily insisting on a hug that Victoria returned with unexpected fierceness. As she watched them walk away, Ethan's hand swinging in Lily's, their heads bent together in conversation, Victoria felt simultaneously fuller and emptier than she had in years. Her phone buzzed with work emails, dozens of them, all marked urgent. The old Victoria would have spent the walk home responding to every one. Instead, she turned her phone to silent and spent the 20-minute walk simply observing the city, noticing details she'd been too busy to see before. A street musician playing saxophone on a corner, an elderly couple walking hand in hand, a teenager teaching a younger sibling to skateboard, patient despite repeated falls. Life happening all around her, and for the first time in forever, she felt like she was part of it instead of separate from it. That evening, Victoria did something unprecedented. She called Rebecca at home, something she never did outside of true emergencies, and told her to clear her calendar for the next 3 Saturday mornings. "All 3 Saturdays?" Rebecca's shock was audible. "Ms. Hale, you have the charity board meeting the 2nd Saturday, and the 3rd Saturday is the Goldman Investor Breakfast. Reschedule them both, or send James. He's perfectly capable of representing Hale Industries for one breakfast." Victoria paced her penthouse, feeling reckless and alive. "I'm taking my Saturdays back, Rebecca, starting now." "Is everything all right? This is very unlike you." "Everything's fine. Better than fine. I'm just making some changes." After she hung up, Victoria stood at her windows watching the city lights come alive. Her reflection in the glass looked the same as always. Same face, same expensive apartment, same solitary silhouette. But something inside had shifted. Some fundamental reordering of priorities that she couldn't quite articulate yet. Her phone rang. Ethan. "Hey," he said, his voice warm through the speaker. Lily wanted me to call and make sure you got home okay. She's worried you might have gotten lost or eaten by park squirrels. Victoria laughed. Tell her I survived the squirrels. Barely. She also wanted me to tell you that you're officially invited to her birthday party next month. It's going to be at the community center, and there will be cake and a bounce house and probably chaos. You're under no obligation to attend, but fair warning, she'll be devastated if you don't. I'll be there, Victoria said without hesitation. What does she want for her birthday? Victoria, you don't have to. I know I don't have to. I want to. What does she want? Ethan was quiet for a moment. Books. She's obsessed with reading right now. Anything with adventure and strong female characters. But really, you don't need to bring anything. Your presence would be gift enough. I'll bring books, Victoria said firmly. And I'll be there. Just tell me when and where. After they said goodbye, Victoria immediately ordered a dozen carefully selected children's books online, each one featuring brave girls and fantastic adventures. She added a note to the order. For Lily, who thinks everyone needs someone to share marshmallows with. You're absolutely right. Love, Victoria. Love. She'd signed it with love. When was the last time she'd used that word with anyone? The following week passed in a strange duality. At work, Victoria was her usual formidable self, decisive, strategic, occasionally terrifying. She closed a major acquisition, fired an underperforming VP, and gave a presentation that had the board applauding. But underneath the corporate armor, something was different. She found herself noticing things she'd ignored before. The young analyst who stayed late every night, clearly burning out but too scared to admit it. Victoria called him into her office and told him to go home at 6. That exhaustion wasn't the same as dedication. He looked at her like she'd grown a second head, but practically ran for the elevator. The administrative assistant, whose mother was in the hospital. Victoria arranged for flowers to be sent and personally approved 2 weeks of paid family leave, even though company policy only allowed one. And on Wednesday, she instituted a new policy requiring all executives to leave the office by 7 p.m. unless actively managing a crisis. James nearly fell out of his chair when she announced it. You're mandating that we leave work? He sputtered. Victoria, that's insane. Half our competitive advantage comes from outworking everyone else. Our competitive advantage comes from having rested, mentally healthy executives who make good decisions, Victoria corrected. Exhausted people make expensive mistakes. Consider this a strategic investment in cognitive function. But the truth was simpler and more personal. She'd spent Saturday morning watching Ethan be present for his daughter, truly present, and it had shown her how much of her own life she'd been missing while chasing the next achievement. If she was going to change her own patterns, she needed to change the culture that enabled them. Friday afternoon, she found herself back at the daily grind for coffee with Ethan. It had become a ritual somehow, this weekly hour where they talked about everything and nothing, where Victoria practiced being honest instead of strategic. Lily hasn't stopped talking about you, Ethan said, stirring sugar into his coffee. You're officially her favorite person who isn't family. She's convinced you're going to teach her how to be a boss lady when she grows up. Is that what she calls it? Boss lady? That's the polite version. Yesterday, she told her teacher she wanted to be a boss-ass lady, like Victoria when she grows up. I got a very stern note home about appropriate language. Victoria burst out laughing, drawing curious looks from other patrons. I'm so sorry. That's completely my fault. Completely worth it to see the teacher's face. Ethan grinned. Though we did have a conversation about which words are for adults only. Lily has decided that when she turns 7, she'll be old enough for the grown-up vocabulary. I have a year to prepare. She's remarkable, Victoria said sincerely. You're doing an amazing job with her. Some days I feel like I'm barely keeping my head above water. She asked me last night why her mama died but mean people get to live. How do you answer that? How do you explain random tragedy to a 6-year-old when you don't understand it yourself? Victoria reached across the table and covered his hand with hers, the gesture surprising both of them. What did you say? I said that life isn't fair, but that doesn't mean it's not worth living. That her mama would want her to find joy anyway, to be kind anyway, to love people even though losing them hurts. His voice roughened. And that even though mama's gone, she left behind the best gift possible. A little girl who has her smile and her generous heart and her terrible sense of humor. That's beautiful, Ethan. That's survival. He turned his hand over, threading their fingers together. Some days you just say whatever keeps everyone breathing until tomorrow. Tomorrow you figure out the next thing. They sat like that for a moment, hands joined across the coffee-ringed table, and Victoria felt more connected to another human being than she had in decades. Not because of shared business interests or social circles or strategic alliances, just because of genuine care and growing affection and the slow building of real friendship. "Can I tell you something?" Victoria said quietly. "Something I haven't told anyone?" "Of course. I went to see a therapist this week." The words came out in a rush. "First time in my life. I've spent 38 years convinced I could handle everything alone, that asking for help was weakness. And then I met you and Lily, and I realized I don't actually have to carry everything by myself. That maybe the strongest thing I can do is admit I need help figuring out how to be human again." Ethan's hand tightened on hers. "Victoria, that's incredible. How did it go?" "Terrifying, humbling, necessary." She smiled wryly. "The therapist told me I show classic signs of achievement addiction and emotional avoidance. Apparently, I've been using work as a way to not deal with the fact that I'm desperately lonely and have no idea how to form genuine connections with people." "That sounds about right," Ethan said gently. "Takes one to know one." "I did the same thing with grief, stayed so busy taking care of Lily and work and everything else that I didn't have to feel how much I was hurting." "How did you stop?" "Emily made me. Forced me to actually talk about Sarah, to cry, to admit I was drowning. Signed me up for therapy and threatened to kidnap Lily if I didn't go." He smiled at the memory. "Best thing anyone ever did for me. Saved my life, probably." "I always thought therapy was for people who couldn't handle their problems," Victoria admitted. "That strong people just push through." "Strong people ask for help. Weak people pretend they don't need it." Ethan's eyes were serious. "You're one of the strongest people I know, Victoria. The fact that you recognized you needed support and actually sought it out, that takes more courage than running a billion-dollar company." Victoria felt tears threatening again. She seemed to cry more in the past 2 weeks than she had in the past 2 decades. "I don't feel strong. I feel like I'm barely holding it together, like I'm learning to be a person from scratch at 38 years old." "That's because you're learning. And learning is uncomfortable. But you're doing it anyway, and that's what matters." They finished their coffee and walked out into the crisp November afternoon. The sun was already starting to set, painting Chicago's skyline in shades of amber and rose. Without discussing it, they started walking together, neither ready for the conversation to end. "Tell me about your week," Victoria said. "The real version, not the polite summary." So Ethan told her about the work project that was frustrating him, about Lily's teacher conference, where he'd learned she was excelling in reading but struggling with math, about the pipes in his apartment that had burst on Tuesday morning, requiring an expensive emergency repair. Normal life stuff, the kind of ordinary challenges Victoria had never had to deal with in her insulated world of assistants and service providers. "How much was the repair rate?" she found herself asking. $1,200, wiped out most of my emergency fund, but that's what it's there for, right?" Ethan shrugged, but Victoria could see the stress and the tightness around his eyes. Her first instinct was to offer to pay for it, to make the problem disappear with her checkbook. But something stopped her. That would be Victoria, the CEO, solving problems with money. What Ethan needed was Victoria, the friend, offering support without turning it into a transaction. "That's rough," she said instead. "I'm sorry you had to deal with that. Part of being an adult, unfortunately. The glamorous life of a single dad." He smiled wryly. "Not exactly the lifestyle you're used to." "My lifestyle is lonely and hollow," Victoria said bluntly. "Yours is real. I know which one I prefer." They'd reached the entrance to Victoria's building without her realizing it. The doorman was already moving to open the door, but Victoria didn't want to go inside yet. Didn't want to return to her pristine penthouse and its carefully curated emptiness. "Come up for dinner," she heard herself say. "Both of you. I'll order in whatever Lily likes. Please? I'm not ready to be alone yet." Ethan studied her face for a long moment. "You sure? It's Friday night. We're probably not your usual company." "You're exactly the company I want." So 30 minutes later, Victoria's penthouse, which had never heard the sound of a child's laughter, was filled with Lily's excited chatter as she explored every corner with wide-eyed wonder. "This is like a castle," Lily breathed, pressing her nose against the floor-to-ceiling windows. "You can see the whole world from here. Daddy, come look. You can see everything." Ethan joined his daughter at the window, slipping an arm around her shoulders. "Pretty amazing view, isn't it?" "Do you ever get lonely up here?" Lily asked Victoria with a child's devastating directness. "It's so big, and there's only one of you." Victoria felt like she'd been punched in the chest. "Yes," she said honestly. "I get very lonely sometimes." "You should get a pet," Lily said seriously. "Or a friend. Or both. Everyone needs someone." "You're absolutely right." Victoria crouched down to Lily's level. "Which is why I'm so glad you and your dad came over tonight. You're teaching me how to have friends again." Lily considered this, then threw her arms around Victoria's neck in an impulsive hug. "You're my friend too. And friends share things, so if you want to share Mr. Whiskers sometimes, you can visit him. He's a very good friend, even though he's a fish." Over Lily's head, Victoria's eyes met Ethan's. The look on his face was tender and complicated, full of things neither of them were quite ready to say out loud. They ordered pizza, Lily's request, and ate sitting on the floor because Lily declared that fancy couches were too fancy for eating and everyone knew pizza tasted better on the ground. It was the most informal meal Victoria had ever eaten in her penthouse, and somehow the best. After dinner, Lily begged to see Victoria's closet, having spotted it during her earlier exploration. Victoria led her to the walk-in closet that was larger than many people's bedrooms, filled with designer dresses and suits and shoes that cost more than most monthly rents. "It's like a princess closet," Lily whispered, running her hands over silk and cashmere with reverent care. "Can I try something on, please?" So Victoria found herself helping a 6-year-old into a cocktail dress that pooled around her tiny frame like a silk puddle, the hem dragging several feet behind her. Lily paraded around the penthouse in the dress and Victoria's heels, which were comically oversized on her small feet. "I'm boss ass lady," Lily announced, striking a pose. "I make important decisions and wear fancy shoes." "Lily Jane Cole!" Ethan tried to sound stern but was clearly fighting laughter. "What did we say about grown-up words?" "That I have to wait until I'm 7, Lily sighed dramatically. "Fine, I'm boss lady, the regular kind. Is that better?" "Much better." They spent the rest of the evening playing dress-up, Lily working her way through Victoria's closet with the serious concentration of a fashion designer. Victoria found herself laughing more in 3 hours than she had in 3 months, her expensive clothes scattered across her bedroom floor in joyful disarray. Around 8:30, Lily started to fade, her boundless energy finally depleting. She curled up on Victoria's couch in one of Victoria's cashmere sweaters, which doubled as a blanket on her small frame. "Can we come back next Friday?" she asked sleepily. "This is the best Friday ever." "Any time you want," Victoria promised, brushing hair back from Lily's face with surprising tenderness. Within minutes, Lily was asleep. Ethan carefully gathered her up, and Victoria walked them to the door. "Thank you for tonight," Ethan said quietly. "She really loves you, you know. And kids are good judges of character." "I love her too," Victoria said, surprising herself with how easily the words came. "Both of you. You've changed my life in ways I'm still trying to understand." Ethan shifted Lily's weight, then leaned in and kissed Victoria's cheek. It was brief and gentle and completely platonic, but it left her skin tingling where his lips had touched. "See you tomorrow?" he asked. "Saturday at the park?" "I'll be there." After they left, Victoria wandered through her penthouse in a daze. The pristine order had been disrupted. Pizza boxes on the counter, Lily's shoes by the door, Victoria's clothes scattered in happy chaos. The apartment looked lived in for the first time since she'd moved in, and for the first time coming home didn't feel like returning to a beautiful prison. It felt like coming home to a place where laughter lived, where friends were welcome, where life happened instead of just time passing. Victoria cleaned up slowly, savoring the lingering warmth of their presence. She hung up her clothes, noting the small wrinkles and creases from Lily's enthusiastic modeling session. The old Victoria would have sent them immediately to the dry cleaner. Instead, she hung them as they were, imperfect and real. Her phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. "Lily wants you to know that you're officially her second favorite person after me." High praise from a 6-year-old. Thank you for tonight. It meant more than you know. Victoria typed back, thank you. For seeing past the CEO and treating me like a person. For bringing Lily into my life. For teaching me that loneliness isn't inevitable. I don't know what this is between us, but I'm grateful for it. The response came quickly. Me too. Sleep well, Victoria. She did sleep well that night, better than she had in years. And when she woke Saturday morning, it was with anticipation instead of dread, with excitement to see Ethan and Lily instead of another day of carefully managed emptiness. Victoria was learning what it felt like to not be alone. And surprisingly, terrifyingly, wonderfully, she was learning that she liked it. The Saturdays became sacred. Over the next 3 weeks, Victoria found herself living for those mornings at the park with Ethan and Lily, each one teaching her something new about what it meant to simply be present in her own life. She learned that hot chocolate tasted better when shared on a cold bench while watching ducks. She learned that skinned knees required both bandages and declarations that the injured party was incredibly brave. She learned that sometimes the most important thing she could do with her time was push a little girl on a swing while her father watched with grateful eyes. But it was the quiet moments with Ethan that were changing her most profoundly. Their Friday afternoon coffees had expanded into long walks through the city, conversations that stretched for hours as they peeled back layers neither had shown anyone else in years. He told her about the guilt he still carried over Sarah's death, the irrational belief that if he'd driven that day instead of her, maybe she'd still be alive. She told him about the father who'd never said he was proud, who died before Victoria could prove she was worthy of something more than his disappointment. On the third Friday in November, they were walking along the Riverwalk when Ethan suddenly stopped. I need to tell you something, he said, his voice serious enough to make Victoria's heart race with sudden anxiety. And I need you to really hear me. Okay, Victoria said carefully. What is it? I'm falling for you. The words came out rushed, like he'd been holding them back and they'd finally broken free. I know that's complicated. I know you're technically my boss and there are probably 100 reasons why this is a terrible idea. But I'm falling for you, Victoria, and I needed you to know. Victoria's breath caught in her throat. She'd known something was building between them, had felt it in every shared glance and accidental touch, but hearing the words out loud made it undeniably real. Ethan, you don't have to say anything, he interrupted quickly. I'm not asking for anything. I just needed to be honest. You've taught me that honesty matters more than safety. And I couldn't keep pretending this was just friendship when it's become so much more than that. Victoria looked at him standing there in the fading afternoon light, this good man who'd seen her at her worst and somehow found something worth caring about. She thought about all the reasons this was impossible, the power dynamic, the professional complications, the risk to both their careers. She thought about what James would say, what the board would think, what Cynthia Blackwood would write in her poisonous column. And then she thought about what her therapist had said just yesterday. At some point, Victoria, you have to decide if you're going to keep building walls or start building a life. I'm falling for you too, Victoria said, her voice shaking but certain. And you're right. It's complicated and possibly a terrible idea, and I have no idea how to navigate this. But I'm tired of making decisions based on fear. I'm tired of protecting my reputation at the expense of my happiness. I'm tired of being alone. Ethan's face transformed with hope and relief and something that looked remarkably like joy. So what do we do? We figure it out, Victoria said, taking his hand. Together. We're honest about it. We're careful about the professional boundaries, and we see where this goes. If it becomes a problem at work, I'll handle it. But I'm not walking away from this. I'm not walking away from you. He pulled her close then, right there on the Riverwalk with joggers passing and the Chicago skyline glittering behind them, and kissed her like she was precious and worth the risk and everything he'd been hoping for. Victoria kissed him back with years of loneliness and longing pouring into that single perfect moment, finally understanding what all the songs and poems had been talking about all along. When they finally broke apart, both breathless and smiling, Victoria felt lighter than she had in decades. We should probably talk about the logistics, Ethan said, his arms still around her waist. The work situation, how we handle this publicly. Monday morning, I'm going to HR, Victoria said decisively. I'll disclose the relationship, recuse myself from any decisions affecting your employment, and make sure there's a clear protocol in place. It won't be easy, and people will talk, but we'll handle it properly." "You'd really do that? Risk the gossip and judgment?" "For you? Yes." Victoria touched his face, marveling at her own certainty. "I've spent my entire life doing what was expected, what was safe, what protected my image. For once, I want to do what makes me happy. And you make me happy, Ethan. You and Lily both." His smile was brilliant. "She's going to lose her mind when she finds out. She's been not so subtly asking when you're going to be her mommy." Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. "That's a big step. I don't want to confuse her or—" "I know. We'll take it slow. Make sure she understands that relationships take time." Ethan's expression grew serious. "But Victoria, you should know that this isn't casual for me. I'm not looking for something temporary. I've got a kid to think about, and I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't think it could be real." "It is real," Victoria said softly. "Maybe the most real thing in my life right now." They walked back toward her building hand in hand, planning and talking, and occasionally stopping to kiss like teenagers. By the time Victoria rode the elevator up to her penthouse, her entire world had shifted on its axis. She wasn't just Victoria Hale, CEO, anymore. She was Victoria, who was dating someone, who had real friends, who was learning to build a life instead of just a career. That evening, she called James at home for the second time in their entire professional relationship. "This better be important," he grumbled. "I'm watching the game." "I'm dating Ethan Cole," Victoria said without preamble. "The engineer from the gala. I wanted you to hear it from me before I go to HR on Monday." There was a long silence. Then James sighed heavily. "Well, I can't say I'm surprised. You've been different since you met him. Happier. More human. Is that a problem? Is he good to you?" The question surprised her. "Yes. Very good to me. Does he see you as a person instead of a title?" "Yes." "Then it's not a problem for me," James said firmly, "though HR is going to have a field day with the paperwork. And you know there will be people who say you're showing favoritism or that he's using you for advancement. Let them talk. I know the truth, and so does Ethan. That's what matters. Look at you, not caring what people think. Character growth in real time." James's tone was warm despite the teasing. "I'm happy for you, Victoria. Genuinely. You deserve this." After they hung up, Victoria stood at her windows overlooking the city, processing everything that had changed in just a few short weeks. A month ago, she'd been drowning in champagne and loneliness, convinced she had to carry everything alone. Now she had Ethan and Lily and the beginning of something that felt like family. Now she had Friday coffee dates and Saturday park mornings, and the knowledge that she could ask for help without it being weakness. Her phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. "Lily wants to know if you're coming to her birthday party next Saturday. She's made you a special invitation and everything." Victoria smiled and typed back, "I wouldn't miss it for anything. Tell her I can't wait." The response was immediate. "She's jumping on the couch screaming right now. I'm supposed to tell you that you're the best, and she loves you more than ice cream. This is apparently the highest compliment a 6-year-old can give. Tell her I love her more than quarterly earnings reports. That's the highest compliment a CEO can give." She has no idea what that means, but she's very impressed. Victoria laughed out loud in her empty penthouse, the sound echoing off the walls and somehow making the space feel less lonely. She was learning that happiness wasn't about having a perfect life, or achieving every goal, or maintaining an unblemished reputation. It was about moments like this, laughing at texts from a man she was falling for about his daughter, who somehow loved her despite all her sharp edges. Monday morning arrived with Victoria's resolve firmly intact. She dressed in her armor, the Tom Ford suit, the Louboutins, the perfectly applied makeup. But underneath, she felt different, softer maybe, or just more human. She walked into HR at 8:30 sharp and spent an hour with the director, formally disclosing her relationship with Ethan and establishing protocols to prevent any conflicts of interest. The director was professional, but clearly shocked. "Ms. Hale, I have to ask, are you certain about this? The optics alone could be problematic, and there will inevitably be questions about favoritism." "I'm certain," Victoria said firmly, "and I expect those questions, which is why we're implementing clear oversight. All decisions affecting Mr. Cole's employment will be reviewed by James Hartley. Any promotions, raises, or performance evaluations will go through an independent committee. I want absolute transparency." "That's very thorough." The director made notes, her expression thoughtful. "May I speak candidly, Ms. Hale?" "Please." "I've worked here for 12 years, and I've never seen you take a personal interest in anyone. The fact that you're willing to navigate these complications rather than simply walk away tells me this must be important to you." "It is," Victoria said quietly, "more important than I can adequately express." By noon, the news had spread through the office like wildfire. Victoria could feel the whispers following her through the hallways, could see the curious glances and raised eyebrows. She ignored all of it with the same iron will she'd used to build her empire, refusing to let other people's opinions dictate her choices. Ethan called her that afternoon, his voice strained. "People are staring. My entire department is buzzing. Someone asked if I'm sleeping my way to a promotion." "What did you say?" "That my personal life is personal and my work speaks for itself." He paused. "But Victoria, this is hard. I knew there would be talk, but actually experiencing it is different. I don't want people thinking I'm using you or that you're showing me favoritism." "Then we prove them wrong," Victoria said firmly. "We do our jobs, we maintain our boundaries at work, and we let our actions demonstrate that this relationship doesn't compromise our professional integrity. It won't be easy, but nothing worthwhile ever is." "You're sure about this? About us?" "I've never been more sure of anything." That Saturday, Lily's birthday party was controlled chaos in the best possible way. 26-year-olds running wild in a community center, fueled by cake and sugar and the boundless energy of childhood. Victoria arrived with her carefully selected books wrapped in cheerful paper, feeling more nervous than she had for any board presentation. Lily spotted her immediately and came running, launching herself into Victoria's arms with such force they both nearly fell over. You came! I told everyone my friend Victoria was coming, and she's really important but also really nice, and she brought me presents." The words tumbled out in an excited rush. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," Victoria said, hugging her tight. "I wouldn't have missed this for anything." The party was a revelation. Victoria found herself sitting on the floor playing games she'd never heard of, singing off-key to birthday songs, and genuinely laughing as children covered themselves in frosting and streamers. She met Ethan's sister-in-law, Emily, who pulled her aside during cake time. "I need to thank you," Emily said, her eyes warm. "I haven't seen Ethan this happy since before Sarah died. Whatever you're doing, it's working. He's coming back to life." "He's doing the same for me," Victoria admitted. "I didn't realize how much I'd shut down until he helped me remember how to feel again." "Sarah would have liked you," Emily said thoughtfully. "She always said Ethan needed someone strong enough to challenge him. Someone who wouldn't let him hide behind being a dad and forget he was also a person who deserved happiness." The words settled into Victoria's chest, warm and affirming. She'd been so worried about intruding on Sarah's memory, about trying to fill shoes that could never be filled. But maybe that wasn't what this was about. Maybe it was about honoring Sarah's legacy by helping the family she'd left behind find joy again. Later, as the party wound down and exhausted children were collected by their parents, Victoria helped Ethan clean up, while Lily showed off her new books to anyone who would listen. "Thank you for being here," Ethan said, tying up a trash bag full of paper plates and party debris. This meant the world to her, to both of us. "Thank you for including me." Victoria looked around the community center, at the streamers and balloons and evidence of celebration. "A month ago, I would have considered this beneath me, too ordinary, too common. Now I realize this is what I've been missing. This is what actually matters." "Daddy! Victoria!" Lily ran over, clutching her favorite new book. "Can Victoria come home with us, please? We could read my new books and have pizza, and she could stay for bedtime stories." Ethan looked at Victoria with a question in his eyes. This was a big step, crossing from park mornings and parties into the intimate routine of their actual home life. "I'd love to," Victoria said without hesitation, "if your dad says it's okay." "More than okay," Ethan said softly. So Victoria found herself in Ethan's modest two-bedroom apartment for the first time, seeing where he actually lived his life. It was nothing like her penthouse. The furniture was mismatched, the walls needed painting, and there was evidence of a 6-year-old everywhere she looked. Lily's artwork covered the refrigerator. Toys spilled out of bins in the corner. A photo of Sarah hung in the living room, her smile radiant and full of life. Victoria paused in front of the photo, studying the woman who'd held Ethan's heart first. "She's beautiful," Victoria said quietly. "She was," Ethan agreed, coming to stand beside her. "I worried that you might feel uncomfortable seeing her picture, but she's part of our story, part of who Lily is. I can't erase her." "I would never want you to." Victoria touched his hand. "She gave you Lily. She shaped who you are. I'm grateful to her for that." They ordered pizza, apparently the universal solution to dinner decisions, and ate at Ethan's small kitchen table while Lily chattered about every gift and every game and every moment of her perfect birthday. After dinner, Victoria helped with bath time, learning the specific temperature Lily required and the elaborate protocol for washing hair without getting soap in eyes. Then came bedtime stories, with Victoria sitting on one side of Lily's bed and Ethan on the other taking turns reading from the new books. Lily's eyes grew heavy halfway through the third story, her small body relaxing into sleep. "She's out," Ethan whispered, carefully extracting himself from the bed. Victoria followed him out, pausing to look back at the sleeping child who'd somehow claimed a permanent place in her heart. Then she and Ethan retreated to the living room, where they settled onto his worn couch with cups of tea. "This is my real life," Ethan said, gesturing around the modest apartment. "No glamour, no luxury. Just me and Lily, and a lot of improvisation. I need you to understand what you're getting into if we do this. It's messy and complicated and sometimes exhausting." "Ethan, look at me." Victoria waited until his eyes met hers. "I have all the glamour and luxury anyone could want, and it's the emptiest existence imaginable. This," she gestured around the lived-in apartment, "this is real. This is what I want. Not despite the mess and complication, but because of it. Because this is life actually being lived, not just time being passed." He kissed her then, soft and slow and full of promise. When they broke apart, his eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I love you," he said simply. "I know it's fast and maybe crazy, but I love you, Victoria Hale." "I love you too," Victoria whispered, the words feeling both terrifying and exactly right. "I didn't think I was capable of this anymore, of feeling this much. But you make me want to be braver, to risk more, to actually live instead of just survive." They talked late into the night, making plans and dreaming about futures that included both of them. Eventually, Victoria called for her car, knowing she needed to go home, even though part of her wanted to stay in this warm little apartment forever. At the door, Ethan pulled her close one more time. "Next Friday? Our usual coffee?" "Next Friday," Victoria confirmed, "and Saturday at the park, and every day in between where we can steal a moment." The next few weeks unfolded with a rhythm Victoria had never experienced before. Work was still demanding. She closed another major deal, launched a new product line, continued to run her empire with the same fierce competence. But now work was just part of her life instead of the entirety of it. Now she had Friday coffees with Ethan, where they talked about everything and nothing. Saturday mornings at the park with Lily, who'd appointed herself the official relationship cheerleader. Sunday dinners at Ethan's apartment, helping cook meals and clean up afterward and feeling like part of something bigger than herself. The office gossip eventually died down as people realized that Victoria's relationship with Ethan wasn't affecting her professional judgment or his career trajectory. If anything, the oversight committee was harder on him than they would have been otherwise, determined to prove there was no favoritism. December arrived with Chicago's first real snow, transforming the city into something magical. Victoria found herself doing things she'd never done before: ice skating with Ethan and Lily at Millennium Park, shopping for Christmas presents with actual thought and care instead of delegating it to her assistant, attending Lily's school holiday concert and crying genuine tears when she sang her solo. Christmas Eve found Victoria in Ethan's apartment, helping Lily set out cookies for Santa while Ethan assembled a complicated toy in the bedroom. She was wearing jeans and one of Ethan's sweaters, her hair in a messy ponytail, and she'd never felt more beautiful or more herself. "Victoria?" Lily looked up from arranging cookies with mathematical precision. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course, sweetheart." "Are you going to stay? Like, forever?" The question was asked with a 6-year-old's devastating directness. Victoria's heart clenched. She knelt down to Lily's level, taking her small hands. I can't promise forever, because that's a really long time and nobody knows exactly what the future holds. But I can promise that I love you and your daddy very much, and I'm not going anywhere unless you want me to. I don't want you to go anywhere, Lily said seriously. I want you to stay and be part of our family. Is that okay? That's more than okay, Victoria said, pulling her into a hug as tears streamed down her face. That's everything I want too. Later that evening, after Lily was asleep and the presents were arranged under their modest tree, Victoria and Ethan sat on the couch watching the lights twinkle. I have something for you, Ethan said, pulling out a small wrapped box. It's not expensive or fancy, but it means something. Victoria unwrapped it carefully to find a simple silver necklace with a small pendant. On one side was engraved the date of the gala where they'd met. On the other, strength is showing up. Ethan, she breathed, tears threatening again. You showed up that night when you could have hidden. You showed up for coffee when you could have kept your distance. You showed up for Lily and for me and for yourself, over and over again, even when it was scary. That's real strength, Victoria, and I wanted you to have something to remember that. Victoria let him fasten it around her neck, her fingers going to the pendant. I have something for you too, but it's not wrapped or traditional. She pulled out an envelope and handed it to him. Inside was a letter, pages of handwritten words she'd labored over for days. Ethan read it silently, his expression shifting from curiosity to wonder to overwhelming emotion. The letter detailed everything Victoria had learned from him, every way he'd changed her life, every fear he'd helped her overcome. It talked about how he'd taught her that asking for help was strength, that vulnerability was courage, that love was worth the risk of pain. It ended with a simple truth. You saved my life that night at the gala, and every day since you've taught me how to actually live it. When he finished reading, Ethan set the letter down carefully and pulled Victoria into his arms, holding her like she was precious and irreplaceable. Marry me, he whispered against her hair. Victoria pulled back to look at his face, certain she'd misheard. What? Marry me, Ethan repeated, his eyes fierce and certain. I know it's fast. I know people will talk and judge and say we're crazy. But I love you, Victoria. I love you, and I want to build a life with you. I want Lily to have a mom who chooses to be there. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want everything, with you. So marry me. Victoria thought about all the reasons she should say no. The optics, the complications, the speed of it all. She thought about what the board would say, what society would whisper, what her younger self would have counseled. And then she thought about what her therapist had said. At some point, you have to decide if you're going to keep building walls or start building a life. Yes, Victoria said, laughing and crying at the same time. Yes, I'll marry you. I'll marry both of you. I'll build this life with you and figure out the complications as we go. Ethan kissed her then, deep and promising and full of joy. When they finally broke apart, both breathless and grinning like fools, the Chicago snow was falling softly outside the window, blanketing the city in quiet magic. 6 months later, Victoria stood in front of a mirror in a simple ivory dress, Emily fussing with her hair while Lily twirled in her flower girl dress. You look like a princess, Lily declared. I told you that you were a secret princess. You were right, Victoria said, pulling her soon-to-be daughter into a hug. You're always right. The wedding was small, just close friends and family in the same community center where Lily had celebrated her birthday. No designer gown, no ice sculptures, no society photographer. Just people who genuinely loved them, gathered to witness two broken people choosing to heal together. James walked Victoria down the aisle, squeezing her hand before letting go. He's a good man, and you deserve good things, Victoria. Thank you, she whispered, for everything, for being my friend when I didn't know how to have friends. Always, James said simply. Then she was standing across from Ethan, his hands warm and steady in hers, his eyes full of love and promise and absolute certainty. Lily stood between them, holding a small pillow with their rings, practically vibrating with excitement. The officiant's words washed over them, traditional and meaningful, but Victoria barely heard them. She was too focused on Ethan's face, on the miracle that had brought them together, on the knowledge that she'd almost missed this by staying locked in her tower of isolation. "I do," Ethan said when the time came, his voice clear and strong. "I do," Victoria echoed, meaning it with every fiber of her being. When they kissed, Lily cheered loudly, prompting laughter from everyone gathered, and Victoria felt something settle into place inside her chest, the bone-deep certainty that she was finally home. The reception was simple but joyful. They danced in the same space where they'd celebrated Lily's birthday, ate cake that was delicious but not designed, gave toasts that were heartfelt instead of polished. Emily pulled Victoria aside during dinner, tears in her eyes. "Sarah would have loved this," she said quietly. "She would have loved you. Thank you for loving them both so well." Victoria hugged her tightly, understanding that she wasn't replacing anyone. She was adding to their story, becoming part of the family that Sarah had started and loss had reshaped. Late in the evening, after most guests had left and Lily had fallen asleep on a chair, her flower crown askew, Victoria and Ethan swayed together on the empty dance floor. "No regrets?" Ethan asked softly. Victoria thought about her old life, the corner office, the pristine penthouse, the carefully controlled existence that had looked so perfect and felt so empty. She thought about the woman she'd been at that gala 8 months ago, drowning in champagne and desperately alone. "Not a single one," she said truthfully. "You taught me that real strength isn't dominance or control or never needing anyone. Real strength is showing up when others turn away. It's accepting help when you need it. It's choosing connection over isolation, even when it's terrifying." "We taught each other," Ethan corrected gently. "You showed me that it's possible to love again after loss. That opening your heart to someone new doesn't mean forgetting the past. You gave me permission to be happy again." They held each other close as the last song played, building their future on a foundation of honest conversations and shared mornings and the radical choice to be vulnerable. Outside, Chicago glittered under the stars, a city full of stories and second chances and people learning to be brave enough to connect. Victoria's phone buzzed in her small clutch, probably work emails or board member congratulations. She ignored it completely. The old Victoria would have checked immediately, unable to truly disconnect. The new Victoria knew that whatever it was could wait. This moment, dancing with her husband while their daughter slept nearby, was infinitely more important than any email or deal or corporate crisis. "Ready to go home?" Ethan asked eventually. Home. Not her penthouse or his apartment, but the house they'd bought together last month. A real home with a yard for Lily and space for a dog they'd promised to get, and rooms that would be lived in instead of just maintained. A place where laughter would echo, and messes would happen, and love would grow in all the imperfect, beautiful ways that made life worth living. "More than ready," Victoria said, kissing him softly. "Let's go home." They collected a sleepy Lily, said goodbye to the last lingering guests, and walked out into the warm June night. Their car, Ethan's old Honda, because Victoria had sold her town car and donated the money to Mercy Children's Hospital, waited at the curb. As they drove through Chicago's streets toward their new home, Victoria looked at her reflection in the window. She saw a woman who'd learned that success meant nothing without connection, who'd discovered that asking for help was the bravest thing you could do, who'd found family in unexpected places and love when she'd stopped looking for it. She saw a woman who'd been saved by a stranger's kindness and had learned to save herself by accepting that she didn't have to carry everything alone. Real strength, she'd learned, wasn't about never falling. It was about letting people catch you when you did. It was about showing up for others even when it cost you something. It was about choosing love over loneliness, messy reality over pristine isolation, genuine connection over carefully maintained control. Victoria Hale had spent 15 years building an empire at the expense of everything else. But Ethan Cole had taught her something infinitely more valuable: how to build a life worth living. And as they pulled into the driveway of their new home, Lily stirring sleepily in the back seat and Ethan's hand warm in hers, Victoria knew with absolute certainty that she'd finally found what she'd been searching for all along. Not power or prestige or the empty praise of people who didn't really know her. Just this. Just love and family and the simple, profound gift of not being alone anymore. just home.